unless you count the Senior Bowl. It's been the biggest football drought we've had since August. Welcome into the Voice of College Football, everyone. Appreciate you being here. We have left the link in the live chat for you to call us here at the Voice of College Football and talk college football. We made a connection in our title to the NFL and the Super Bowl. Of course, 1 week, basically from right now, 6 o'clock Eastern time, is typically right about kickoff time. 6:30. I haven't checked the most recent listing for the kickoff time for the 2023 Super Bowl, which is number 56. Is that where we are? 56. Philadelphia Eagles, Kansas City Chiefs. They've never met in a Super Bowl. Kansas City, of course, has appeared in some recent Super Bowl games, winning and losing under Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. Defeated, of course, the San Francisco 49ers down in the fourth quarter, came back with a couple touchdowns late to defeat San Francisco as Mahomes won the Super Bowl, I believe, is the youngest quarterback ever. Somebody check me on that. It was Joe Namath at one time, and that stood for a long, long time at 25 years old. Then I believe Tom Brady was younger than Joe Namath in winning his first Super Bowl in New Orleans against the St. Louis Rams. And I don't believe that was broken until Patrick Mahomes against San Francisco. And again, really good Super Bowl game. San Francisco leading in the fourth quarter. And Kansas City put up 2 touchdowns to win the ball game. And then, of course, Patrick Mahomes met Tom Brady a couple years ago and lost that game to Tampa Bay in a big way. So the Chiefs back at it. And, of course, the Chiefs were in Super Bowl I. Does anyone out there remember that? Do we have any old timers out there? Super Bowl I, Green Bay, Kansas City, and then Super Bowl IV, Hank Stram and company, Len Dawson at quarterback, came back and defeated the Vikings as a 14 or 15-point dog, 23-7. So the Chiefs go for their 5th Super Bowl appearance with 1 win and 1 loss, 2 wins and 2 losses. 5th Super Bowl appearance for Kansas City. 4th, I believe, for Philadelphia, if we count them up against Oakland. That was Dick Vermeil and Ron Jaworski. But Jaworski threw 3 picks in 1981 in the Superdome to Rod Martin, who almost won the MVP, but it went to Jim Plunkett. And the Eagles lost to the Raiders. That was Philadelphia's first Super Bowl appearance. And then in the Andy Reid era, they, of course, lost to the Patriots by a field goal. Donovan McNabb lost his guts on the field. And Patriots defeated the Eagles 24-21 as New England was in that mode of winning, well, their first 3 Super Bowls by a field goal. And then Philadelphia came back, of course, a few years ago with Doug Peterson as the head coach and defeated the Patriots in the Super Bowl with the Philly special, highlighting that at the end of the first half. Yes. So Philadelphia goes for its 4th Super Bowl appearance. They've won 1 of 3. So they finally got a Super Bowl championship in 18. So this would be 5 years since Philly defeated the New England Patriots. We welcome everyone into the Voice of College Football. We will talk college football, anything going on currently. Of course, Tommy Rees, the newly named offensive coordinator at Alabama, released a video the other day highlighting the 2023 recruiting class and who the winners and losers were from that class. And when it comes to a conference, the SEC seems to just dominate even more so than they have over the last 15 to 20 years in recruiting. It's just astounding. And now that Texas and Oklahoma, those numbers to a certain extent, those players that are coming into those 2 programs can be counted for the SEC at some point. It looks to be 2025. We thought it might be 2024, 2025 toward the SEC. Then the SEC dominance is even more pronounced. So you SEC fans, beat your chest. The Big Ten adds a bit with USC and UCLA coming in next year. So the players signed by the Trojans and the Bruins, of course, will not see the field. Well, they will see the field as freshmen, of course, in 2023, but many of them will not be impact players or do much before they are members of the Big Ten. All right. Welcome in, everyone. We have left the link in the chat. We do not need to talk about the Super Bowl, but I've got a number of Super Bowl notes here to go through. So I'm very proud of those. So we will not go too long without citing some connections between college football and the Super Bowl. There, of course, are a zillion because these guys all played in college and they played pretty substantially. All right. Let's go to our first call. We got a Reasonable Gump on the line. What's going on, sir?
Hey, man. Hey, I'm on my Bluetooth headphones. Can you hear me okay? I'm
I
trying
can
these
hear
out.
you just fine, loud and clear.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, this is more of an impromptu call. I didn't actually know you're going live, but I just happened to see you, so I thought I'd pop on.
Well,
But
it's
how you
good when
doing, man?
YouTube lets people know that I'm live. That's a good thing.
Oh, man, dude. I cannot make heads or tails of this Tommy Reese hire. I watched your video on it, and it's more or less like it comes down to just not doubting Saban in this,
That's
but
all I've got for you.
man, I was about to say, because when you look at, Notre Dame's offense the last 3 years, it's really nothing to write home about. So, this one confused me. I'll
Yeah,
say.
so I was actually going to post my own video without bringing in Stephen M. Smith, and I was about set to record that video, and it would have been a similar take. I would have lined up all the stats and all the information and all the evidence on the side of why did Alabama do this, and then provide some disclaimers that could explain why Notre Dame's offense outside of Tommy Reese's direction would not be as prolific as what would be expected or be the benchmark at Alabama, and then kind of give the other side to it. But got a hold of Stephen M. Smith, so he provided some perspective on that. Of course, Notre Dame's been a very run-oriented offense, so you're not going to put up the yards per play and the yards per game and the points that you would with the type of offense that Alabama's run since Lane Kiffin changed things.
True, but it's not like Notre Dame didn't have like any players, on their offense. A lot of
Of
people
course.
say Tommy Reese didn't have much to work with, and he'll be able to really let loose down at Alabama. And I'm like, well, first of all, we don't have any proven receivers either. None of our receivers stood out last year. We're going to have a completely unproven quarterback, no matter which option we end up going with. So, and again, Notre Dame does not have the worst receivers or the worst O line in the world, and they really couldn't. He didn't seem to be able to do much with that. But
Yeah,
Go ahead.
Yeah, obviously they've got talent. They've recruited well, but not on the Alabama plane. But he's never worked with a quarterback like, we're comparing what he did at Notre Dame and those offensive ranks versus what we're used to Alabama producing, of course, with Bryce Young, to those type of quarterbacks, Mac Jones. Now we anticipate one of these two freshmen, or Ty Simpson or Jalen Milroe. Well, I got to say, based on watching the Texas A&M game and the fourth quarter against Arkansas, I'm not too hopeful there. But again, he's going to have a full off season to hone his passing skills and get coached up.
Yeah, I got a feeling it's going to be Ty Simpson.
Yeah,
But
well,
I could be wrong on that.
Milroe doesn't play better than he did in that 5 quarters, it will be, I would think, Ty Simpson as well. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, we'll see. I was pretty public about saying that I'll take just about anyone other than O'Brien, and I'm going to stick by what I said because maybe Saban does see something. I'm not going to go back on what I said just because I'm confused by the hire. But yeah, I guess we'll just have to see what happens. I do kind of think we're going to go back to a more balanced offense, although that's something I was kind of wanting to do for a while. But we'll see with that. As far as the recruiting, man, I gotta say, I gotta get your your opinion on this because it was sort of a drive-by shot in your video. But the Big Ten only gets one 5-star. I know that's going to go up when USC gets over there, but I mean, come on, how does that happen? Shouldn't Ohio State and Michigan get at least 2 or 3 each?
Well, Michigan usually doesn't get too many itself. They might get one. I bet one is their average, or 1.5 might be the over/under on Michigan. Now, Ohio State should do much better than that. But with all of that said, Ohio State still brought in the third best recruiting class based on player average rating.
I think in Michigan's might be due to kind of go up a little bit with their recent success, although Harbaugh's antics in the offseason may have somewhat balanced that out.
But you're right. Let's go back to your original statement. You're definitely right. When you've got 21 5-stars coming to the SEC and you've got one coming to the Big Ten, and you can make all sorts of, there were comments made back to me about, depending on the service, you can add one or add two, maybe the most, but point taken. And maybe for those other services, you could add a handful for the SEC.
I was about to say.
Exactly. So 21-1, and then 7 for Oklahoma and Texas. So they will be playing in the SEC at least as juniors, if not as sophomores or redshirt sophomores or freshmen. So they're going to be in the league very quickly, and that takes the Big 12 down to none. Yeah, it's a lopsided deal and for everybody against the SEC. And of course, you're choosing to highlight the Big Ten because of a number of reasons. They should be able to compete better than the other conferences.
When this is all said and done, I mean, it kind of already is the SEC and the Big Ten in sort of a non-literal way, but eventually I think it's pretty much just going to be that. But I mean, I don't know. The Big Ten's got to do better than that. That shocked me. I don't follow. I'm not a recruiting guy. I don't really follow it that much. I just sort of saw it after the signing day was over and saw that stat somewhere, and I was like, I was pretty surprised by that.
Yeah, Ohio State at number 5, and then Penn State was in that range most of the recruiting season, and they dropped considerably. They finished about 14th, and Michigan was 18th. So for your number 2 and 3 programs, and Michigan fans will get after me, but Michigan's the number 1 program right now on the field, obviously, but we're talking about recruiting, and it's still Ohio State and everybody else in the Big Ten. Yeah, so that's 3 out of the top 18, and then I don't know who's next out of the Big Ten. You got to go quite a ways down the list versus the SEC, 4 out of the top 9, whatever it was, 8 or 9 of the top 17. This is every year. This is every year. It's a wonder the league's not even more dominant on the field.
Yeah. when you think about it like that, but to all these people who say that, recruiting is everything in college football, coaching is, minimal as opposed to the NFL. Well, I've got many other cases to point at, but this is one of the pieces of evidence is that the SEC is that much more, does seem to be that much more talented than everyone else. But like you just pointed out, I mean, they typically win the national championship every year, but their bowl record, at least the past 2 years, has not been all that stellar. And hell, they were for a while they were struggling to have a winning bowl record there.
Yeah, and other things come into play there, of course. So the bowl record is unfortunately a bit tainted, but not making excuses for the SEC because the other conferences have opt-outs as well. But the SEC was clearly the best conference this past season. If you add up the 9-conference record. Everybody else is sitting kind of around 500, except for the ACC, which was like the ACC was like 7-14 before the bowls. I'd have to add in the bowls. I don't remember what the record was after the bowls. I've got that information somewhere here. Everybody else was around 500, and the SEC, I believe, finished 18-9 non-conference against the Power 5. So it's a clear, and the other thing about the recruiting rankings that I understand people, there was one comment made to that video where somebody said, these 5 stars are overrated. Well, what a blanket statement. 5 stars are overrated. Well, they're collectively not overrated I saw a very in-depth rundown of NFL rosters. This was maybe a year ago, so it's very recent. That if you're a 5-star, you have like a 42 to 45% chance of making the NFL, playing in the NFL. If you're a 4-star, it drops to like 12 to 14%. And then the 3-stars, like a 4% chance of playing in the NFL, and obviously way off the board after that. So there is something to the recruiting services doing their jobs and being accurate.
Well, yeah, I mean, basically, you have to decide: do you believe professionals know what they're doing or not?
Well, it
I mean,
gets
at
proven
the end of
out.
the day,
Yeah, well, it,
I
it, it
mean,
gets proven by their performance on the field and then the result of being selected to play in the NFL. And
mhm.
when you made some comment a few minutes ago about the SEC, the talent and trusting the services. Well, I trusted even more when and believe in that talent disparity when, of course, the NFL draft then backs it up as well.
Mhm. Well, all right. One last sort of segue. This isn't long. It's just a little thing here. So, in your own personal opinion, how do you think the Big Ten came off looking at the end of the season? So they started off on fire with the bowls. I think they were like 4-0 at one
Yeah.
point, but and they still ended up with a winning record.
Yeah.
But doesn't the fact that the first time the Big Ten got two teams in the playoffs and then they both lose in the first round, I don't know. That kind of seems like that's a little bit of a bad look.
Oh, it's a bad look
At least to me.
because the direct comparisons with the SEC, those are the only two conferences now that have had two teams in the playoffs. Well, the SEC did that twice, and both teams won, and they won the national championship. So the SEC swept twice in that position, and the SEC or the Big Ten got swept. Now you can break down. I tend to break down the performance, the level of play, all of that. Of course, Michigan lost a close game. Ohio State lost an excruciatingly close game. So they didn't get munched by 4 touchdowns in each game. So
Right.
they were competitive, and especially Ohio State played a pretty brilliant game and just lost to the best team in the country. But the results are the results. 0-2, swept, had a chance to dominate the playoff, have 2 teams in the national championship game and secure a national championship win. And, Ohio State played better than Michigan, but Ohio State also blew it more in a sense by not finishing off that final drive, or else you would think, I think most reasonable people would say Ohio State would have won the national championship.
Man, I'll tell you, man, I watched the end of that Ohio State and Georgia game, and I was so conflicted because I had reasons on both sides to root for one team or the other to win, and then hope the one or the other would lose. So that was a painful game to watch, just because I couldn't decide what I wanted to happen. But to watch Ohio State, or a lot of people blame Ryan Day's play calling. I don't know enough about the team or the offense to say anything about that, but just to march down the field and then just to kind of stall there like that, I didn't quite get it. I thought that if they really wanted to, they could have gotten an extra 20 yards and made that kick a lot less daunting. But,
it seems like it, doesn't
especially
it?
since Georgia just did the exact same thing with Stetson Bennett and a bunch of nameless receivers. That's not any shade at Georgia, by the way. They managed to make a great offense out of nameless players, so that's more of a perk. Well, Alabama got a bunch of name players, and we can't make any sort of offense at all. But I mean, man. Oh, by the way, C.J. Stroud. Let's talk about him for just a second. Everyone's always complaining about that this guy can't run.
Yeah.
Well, I watched him run up and down the field on his last game. Where did that come from? Did you notice that?
The
That was crazy.
The accurate complaint throughout his career is that he can physically run. He's not a 45-year-old George Blanda. He can physically run. He just chooses not to. But with the significance of the game, he obviously chose to put his neck on the line and throw his shoulder at some defenders and take some shots. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I was super impressed watching that guy. I mean, damn.
Yeah, he looked great. To your earlier point about if Ohio State and Michigan would have won these playoff games, or at least if Ohio State would have finished the deal and won the national championship, that would have been good for business for me. My personal preferences aside, it would have opened up a completely different debate about conferences.
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah. That's sort of the one thing the Big Ten's missing.
Yeah.
Well, it's sort of not only is it the one thing the Big Ten's missing, but if you break it down a little more, it's sort of the one thing Ohio State's missing, right? Everyone wants to everyone used to say Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State. Now everyone says Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State. But there's one program in that list that is sort of like, because it's been 9 years now.
Yeah,
and that's a legitimate point to make too.
It is,
because they want to be in the elites, and I think their program is elite quality, but it's just kind of that one missing thing.
Yeah, Bama's
won
3 since then. 3 for Bama, right?
3 for because 6 total. 3 before and 3 since.
Yeah. And Clemson with 2.
And now Georgia with 2.
And Georgia with 2. And it's going to be an interesting year for Clemson because I don't really know where their program is. I don't think it's drifting off into the abyss, but I don't know if they're hanging on to an elite status.
I never thought they were going to drift into the abyss. I don't think anyone thought that. I think when people were making the comments about Clemson's falling off and all that, I think they were making that with the understanding that they're still going to win 9 or 10 games just by virtue of playing in the ACC. Like, I think these last 2 Clemson teams would have probably won 7 or 8 games in the SEC or the Big Ten East. So I think that's the point people are trying to make is while Clemson looks like they're still and they won the ACC, of course, but they may not. They may look a little shinier by virtue of playing in a bad conference.
Sure,
I think
you talk about a bad look. You mentioned the Big Ten in the playoff. Clemson whitewashing the ACC, 9-0 in the ACC if you count the championship game, and they play 3 teams with a pulse, 3 really good teams, and they get whipped. 3 teams outside the conference: Tennessee, South Carolina, and Notre Dame. And
Notre Dame, yeah,
they look bad.
Yeah. That's I only brought up the Big Ten because, like you said, everyone talks about the SEC versus the Big Ten. But I mean, I don't really need to bring up the ACC, right? They've had a bad look for the last 2 presidents. So,
well, yeah, the ACC was really good around 2016-17, and since then they've gone down the toilet.
One last thing. I promise this is it. I heard someone told me that, and this is crazy. I may have to repeat it because I don't think anyone's going to believe me. But someone told me that the Pac-12 actually plays football now.
Can you believe that? They joined the Power 5 this past season.
Oh my God! They joined the Power 5. Just in time to have USC and UCLA ripped away from them. All right.
One last hurrah for the Pac-12.
Maybe they can make the playoffs right before that happens. That would be hilarious. All right, man. That's all I got.
Okay, man. Appreciate you calling, as always.
All right. See ya.
Thanks, everybody, for joining. Clemson fans, hear me out. I didn't say that you had lost your program or you were now going to finish 5th place in it's no longer the Atlantic Division. I just have some questions. I just want to see this 2023 season with new offensive coordinator Garrett Riley. So, of course, Dabo Swinney kind of goes against trend there, where he typically sticks with his guys on the coordinator side. and he got a little aggressive there, fires his offensive coordinator after one season and brings in the new guy, Garrett Riley, the hot shot from TCU. So I applaud Dabo Swinney for that, who is, of course, you've probably heard me say this, my favorite coach in college football. But Dabo Swinney does that. I just have some questions about Clemson. They have not been an elite team the last 2 years. I don't think that's really debatable. They have not been an elite team the last 2 years. Elite program still, that's debatable. Those are two different things. Program, team, specific team for that season versus where does the program stand. All right, welcome into the Voice of College Football. We've got Chris on the line. Chris, what's going on?
Hey, Mark.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
Oh, I was gonna, if it's okay with you, and if you want to make the theme on are we supposed to be talking about the Super Bowl? I mean, I'm a little confused.
Just to basically have a topic every time that we go live. We'd like to have a topic. It kind of directs the conversation, but we always open it up to college football discussion of anybody's choice. So, yes, the Super Bowl is 1 week from today. So if you could tune me down in the background, we've got a lot of reverb there.
How's that?
I think we're good.
Okay. And like I said, I don't want to, if you get reverb, let me know, because I didn't know I was giving you reverb, but I just have a question, I guess. It's not really related to the Super Bowl, but it's related kind of to the topic I keep coming back to. And the only reason I do it, Mark, it's not, people get mad at me, and I don't blame them really, but what I'm trying to do, because you actually brought it up last time we talked, you said that you were going to, and within your right to do it, I guess, you were going to go back and not rewrite history, I don't think, but you're going to make arguments, I think, for by year, I don't know. Teams, I guess, that either you thought should have been in the championship game, maybe, or I know you had a conversation with Steve Dace about, and I actually was able to, after we talked about it, I was able to go back and see what he was talking about, but I don't know that it was really, he gives interesting commentary, I guess, about what he thinks, we're talking, I guess, future years, I guess, we're going to have, 12 teams in a playoff, which, like I say, I hope I don't come across as being like completely against the idea. I don't know that I am. It's just that, I have my own preferences about who would maybe qualify. I was a little disappointed last time. They had like a group chat. I don't even think you were included in it, that people that are, I guess, associated with your network here. And I thought I was really kind of pleasantly encouraged, because like, oh, wait, they're putting, they're giving Tulane a spot. And then I found out pretty quickly that the reason they're doing it is because they're obligated to. And so and it's not that they're, maybe they would have done it anyway, who knows? But, and I'm not saying, I don't even know that I'm saying necessarily that in every circumstance that we need a G5 in every bracket. That's not really what I'm getting at, but.
Well, there's going to be one.
Well, I mean, limited to one team, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's fine.
It's not
most
limited.
years might be the right way to go about it, but
it's technically not limited to one team, but it guarantees one team. There could be two teams. That's unlikely, but there could be two.
Well, I guess I'm not trying to say that they were even wrong about what they were doing. I just I think they included. I don't even remember who they had them playing. I don't think it was against USC, but I guess it might have been. So they, I guess just pretend that they were. I mean, they would have obviously advanced to what they ate. Now they'd be in the Elite Eight, I guess. Which I mean, that's probably about where they would deserve to be anyway after beating USC. I mean, before doing that, maybe not even considered. But that's really not what I'm trying to call in about. But I was just hoping you could give me an idea. And it's a loaded question. I'll be completely fair about it. But what's your opinion of the Syracuse team this last season? Did you have just in general? I mean, I'm just curious what you think of them as a program. It is a loaded question.
Syracuse played quite a bit this past season, and I was impressed with their resourcefulness. They had Garrett Schrader at quarterback, who's a mobile quarterback, not the best passer in the world, but a tough guy that likes to run the ball and is effective. And John Tucker at running backs, a top 10 or 15 running back in the nation, something in that range. They won their first 6.
Right.
We could all see it coming, though. They were playing the better teams on the schedule late, and they played a lot of close games against what turned out to be some pretty bad football teams, like Virginia, for example. They pulled out a game against Virginia. They were pretty fortunate there. The Purdue game, fortunate there. Had some calls go their way. But the impressive point was they were 6-0 when they went to Clemson, and they had a double-digit lead in the second half, going into the fourth quarter, 21-10, if I recall, against Clemson, outplaying Clemson. And, that's where their season could have been made. Of course, they blew the game, and then it was all downhill from there. They only won one more game and went 7-5, lost to Minnesota in the bowl game.
Right.
I think that's I don't want to call it their high water mark, but I think that's a good season for Syracuse football. I think that's about near the best they can do. Win, a 7-5 season, a decent bowl appearance.
We were 7-6, but yeah.
7-6 with the loss. Yeah.
Okay. Well, and it is, I think I gave you advance warning. It was a loaded question. I have them about what it was is I went back and I hope you don't mind me doing this, by the way, because I didn't really ask you for your permission, but I took 6, what I consider to be, from my perspective, and I don't even know how I made the decision. Some of it was kind of I just threw stuff up in the air and see, but I included your final poll and I used mine. And then I used 4 other ones I thought were, I considered to be good pollings.
Yeah.
Anyway, and then I kind of applied a BCS metric where I averaged them out, but I threw away the high and low. So I averaged the 4 that were left after the. Okay, I had Syracuse at number 50. And I think I sent you the list to see what I never heard back from you to see if you got it or not. But the reason I did it. Okay.
Thank you.
Well, and I hope I did it right. I tend to make mistakes a lot. So whether it's the right, any mistakes I make are actually, but I noticed I always seemed higher than I expected them to be. I don't know if I made a mistake with them or not, but anyway, I have Syracuse 50th, and that's, like I said, I have BYU on the brain, but so they were roughly comparable to Michigan in 1984. So I was just curious what you thought of Syracuse so I could compare them to Michigan and make a decision about what you think of BYU, I guess. And, not because of 1984. I mean, I get stuck in 1984. I had BYU and South Alabama, I think, right outside the top 50. So they were right just a little bit behind Syracuse this year. And I guess I was kind of hoping you could give me some thoughts about what you think of BYU at this point in time.
As a program?
Well, I mean, they're going to be in the Big 12.
Sure.
They really haven't played. I mean, according to you, and I'm not saying you're wrong, they really haven't played, I guess. I mean, they schedule good teams all the time. I mean, that.
Sure.
But, I think their schedule at times includes, FCS programs. It includes lackluster. It includes teams that probably aren't even for G5 maybe aren't even considered to be that great. I mean, it includes good G5 too, but they so
sure,
I just kind of
played the likes of Utah Tech, and they've played the likes of Wagner in the last 5 years. I will tell you this, Chris, about BYU's schedule. When I used to rank the schedules, which became an exhausting exercise that I loved, but didn't get the response that I would hope for, so I stopped doing it. So I don't believe I've done it the last 2 off seasons, but I used to take all the Power 5 schedules, and I included Notre Dame and BYU, and I ranked them in terms of difficulty. And BYU was always in the bottom 5 to 7 because they had 3 or 4 extremely weak games. And that's usually what dragged down their schedule, obviously. But they would play 7 or 8
decent
difficult games. Yes.
Sure. 6 or 7. I don't even know if it was quite. You're saying 8. I'm saying 6 or 7. I mean, it's kind of interesting.
Yes.
Even when we disagree, we agree. But I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, I'm not trying to I'm looking at their schedule as I'm talking to you right now. Not this year, but last year, and they actually played Notre Dame. I don't know. They played them 20-20. I know they lost. I mean, I guess it doesn't. There's not a whole lot in moral victories, but they weren't blown out by them. I mean, 20-28. I mean, the team that actually beat them pretty bad was Liberty. Beat them pretty bad. I kind of thought that was kind of a bad, what do you want to call it?
They played Arkansas pretty well for about 3 quarters and got run off the field in the 4th quarter, but it was a really good game for about 3 quarters.
Okay. And then they finished with a win over Southern Methodist, and I guess depending on what you think of Southern Methodist, I don't know if that's a Mexico Bowl. So I think that was the game they had to kind of come from behind to win. But they finished with a win. So like I say, I have them right outside the top 50. I guess kind of the other question I might have, just because I'm curious, I don't know where you define. I think you set the bar pretty high, and I'm not even saying that you shouldn't. But I know, for example, I don't like having to go back to 1984 because it's like that's old school stuff. But how high are you setting the bar as far as for example, that year I have Pittsburgh 80th overall, I know 80th probably isn't going to impress anybody, but I mean, that's where I have them finished as far as proficiency. And I think the highest rated opponent I think was for BYU was Air Force, and they were a top 25 team that season. But I guess my question to you would be, what's the bar set at as far as like, where do you define relevant, I guess, as far as having a good, I mean, I know you've already told me that you don't think the schedule is all that great, but I mean, as far as quality, where does quality start and end at for you? So I just kind of want to know.
Well, it goes in waves and it goes in tiers. You know, there's not a direct cutoff. Like the 50th best team in the country is a quality opponent, and the 51st best team in the country is a lousy opponent. You know, it fans through the entire 131 teams.
Well, no, I did. My question was, I wanted to know if you thought Syracuse, and I don't know that you really told me. I mean, you said they were good at,
I'll tell you where I ranked them. I'm looking at my 1 through 131. So I ranked all 131 teams at the end of the season, and I placed BYU at 42 and Syracuse 49.
Okay, so, well, there you go. I mean, there you go. And, I had BYU at 52. Well, I didn't. No, that's not true. I didn't have them. The composite that I did that included your ranking, the composite, I used a composite rating. They had BYU at 50, tied at 52. So they were just right up. And that's not where I had BYU. So I'm lying to you, I guess. But so you have BYU rated higher than the composite is what I'm trying. So you're giving them a better rating than most people.
Okay.
Well, I mean, and then you're giving Syracuse about the same, which is kind of interesting because, like you said, I mean, again, I don't mean to split hairs with you, Mark, but you were telling me that BYU didn't play anybody any good in 1984, but then you're kind of telling me that Syracuse is a pretty good team. So, I mean, what is it? Is it? Are they good or are they not good? I mean, I just kind of want to. I mean, and you don't have to like.
Let's put the conversation into context, Chris. When we talk 1984 and BYU's
a bowl opponent. Let's just limit it to bowl opponent for now. Let's just limit it to bowl opponent for now. Was Michigan any good, or were they terrible, or were they just okay?
You're comparing Syracuse playing a mid-level bowl game this year. What was it? Wasn't the Music City Bowl, whatever they played in against Minnesota. Anyway, a mid-tier bowl game versus we're talking about a team that was playing for the national championship in 1984.
Right.
So I expect for a team to earn a national championship that they're playing one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the country.
Okay. I understand that.
So
you understand.
I'm just putting, when I say decent opponent, I'm putting that into context of talking about Syracuse playing Minnesota in a bowl game that's meaningless in regards to a championship versus BYU facing an opponent to prove that they should be awarded the national championship. And me saying Air Force isn't a decent opponent under those circumstances, or Michigan was not a decent opponent under those circumstances of trying to award a national championship.
Well, okay. That's a fair criticism. You know that Michigan was, or the point spread was 7 points, don't you, though? I mean, BYU covered the spread. I mean, these are all circumstantial things I know that probably in the big picture don't add up.
Won by 7.
Yeah.
So they must have pushed.
Yeah.
All right, Chris. Well, I appreciate you being here. But for as much as I would love to talk to you about 1984, me personally, I don't think a whole lot of people want to hear about that. But hopefully what I said makes sense. And we can pick up the conversation at another time.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mark.
All right, Chris. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We've got a super chat coming in. We would like to acknowledge that, of course, from Todd. Thank you so much for that. Todd, why did Michigan not recruit better after the playoff? So it's pretty common understanding that if a team has a great season, a breakout season like Michigan had in 2021, that usually the recruiting impact in a positive way comes the next recruiting cycle, which for Michigan would have been this one. In addition, they won the Big Ten championship again. They beat Ohio State again. They went to the playoff again, and they finished with the 18th class in the country. Okay. The only 2 factors that I can see playing into that would be, number one, Jim Harbaugh was talking to NFL teams. So how much does that hurt recruiting when you're trying to pull in 17 and 18-year-old kids who are talking to and being offered by Ohio State, Notre Dame, fill in the blank, other extremely attractive places to play football, but they don't know if the football coach at Michigan is going to be there because he's talking to the Denver Broncos and the Carolina Panthers and who knows who else. So that had to have an impact for a school that typically pulls in, even when it was going 8-4, 9-3, the 8th to 12th class in the nation. And now they pull in the 18th class when they're ruling the Big Ten, going to the playoffs, beating Ohio State. Because again, when you don't know who your coach is going to be, and that issue didn't exist for any other team. Point number one. Point number two would be NIL. Michigan's getting its act together. They seem to be extremely strong and be visionary going forward into the future, but for the time being, not real aggressive with the NIL collective. So those would be my two answers right there. All right. This is going to be a good conversation. We got Jordan Bowman on the line.
What's going on, Mark?
Not too much. How you doing?
I'm doing all right. Well, I was going to call in and talk a little bit about the Tommy Reese situation, but some of the conversation earlier kind of made me and really some of the conversation in the chat just kind of made me it put some other thoughts on my mind. What is your take? Because this is something especially in the past couple of years, I've been hearing a lot, and it's about Clemson and their run from from 2015, 2020, whatever years you want to label, and that it was all because of two generational quarterbacks. And what is your take on the use of the term generational? I said this in the chat. I think the word generational is one of the most overused labels in all of sports to give a player, because it's I think it was Simpson Sampson, or I think I reversed that back. He agreed with me and said that it's kind of an oxymoron, because a generational means, this is a player of his talent only comes once in a generation, and then but then you're saying Clemson had two generational quarterbacks. What is your take on that?
Okay, so these kind of conversations I love, especially with somebody as smart as you, because I almost defined the Clemson run as going back to like 2011 and the decisions made. Yeah, the decisions made, especially after the Orange Bowl. Of course, they bring in Brent Venables, and obviously Dabo really ramped up the program, and we could start to see, the LSU bowl game, Peach Bowl game, and the Ohio State Orange Bowl game, and so forth. Obviously, for Joe Public, College Football Nation, they just care about the playoff and the national championships. But, obviously we saw it building and then become a top 10 program during those years. And now maybe the run is not over. Maybe it's just taking kind of like a Pittsburgh Steelers in the 1970s when they took 2 years off before they won their next two Super Bowls kind of deal. We shall see. So for me, yes, generational quarterback. I don't even know if we went to Google and looked up the definition of generational. How long is a generation? Isn't it like, I don't know if it's 20 years or 40 years. It's something like that. It's either
I think most, it depends, because I know some like for my, I'm a Gen Zer, for example. Like,
that's a good way to.
I was born in '99.
Absolutely,
so
that's a good way to put it.
They typically define it as like anywhere like from the mid '90s, Gen Z from like the mid '90s to like 2005, 6. So like
they're about 15 years.
Yeah. So
most of those. Yeah.
Years. Yeah. So when you and I'm not here to debate the greatness of both those quarterbacks. I'm not trying to like diminish that or anything. Obviously two of the best quarterbacks to play college football in the last 10 years. But to say, especially, and I said this also in the chat, it's funny that Deshaun Watson wasn't really considered generational until after he left Clemson. I mean, he was a very highly touted recruit as a high schooler. Don't get me wrong, but he was not this consensus number one. He was like a borderline 5-star. He was a 4-star in a lot of publications. It was, you go and look at his ratings. He was considered one of the best players in the country, but it wasn't like he's this otherworldly talent like Trevor Lawrence was, like a once in a lifetime kind of player. You wasn't getting comparisons to Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck and stuff like that. But he turned out to be a lot better than his recruiting ranking. But I think it's disingenuous to boil Clemson's run down to to 2 quarterbacks, especially considering the run that Clemson, and I talk about this all the time, the run that Clemson went on from really from 2011. Like you said, it started from 2011 through 2020. The talent development and the scouting and selective recruiting, because it wasn't like Clemson was getting top 5 classes every year. That Clemson went on was truly what made them as great as they were. You have guys like Hunter Renfrow, who was an option quarterback from a nothing school in South Carolina, and Clemson goes and gets him, and he ends up becoming one of the best slot receivers in the NFL. Like, you get a guy like Grady Jarrett. He was a 2-star. Nobody wanted him. I think he had one other Clemson actually was his only Power 5 offer. And he's one of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. And these are just examples, and then you have the elite, recruiting at the skill positions. You can go through the list of Clemson wide receivers that have made an impact in the league and did big things in college as well. All that talent on the defensive line that's kind of continued even through the past couple of years. Clemson has just churned out defensive lineman after defensive lineman over the years. So those teams were really complete products. To say that Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson were the only thing, and I know some people aren't saying that, but it's kind of what they're trying to imply, that everything else was the talent around it was just okay, and they just elevated it to the next level. Those teams were really great through and through. Even like the offensive lines that Clemson had over the years they weren't stellar, but they were very, very well coached, and they weren't always the most loaded, but they played well together. And so I think to kind of boil all of that down to just Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson, and everything else was just a fluke. Dabo is, he's not a great coach. People have said, I've heard that from people saying, yeah, Dabo's not really that great of a coach. He just got lucky. That kind of stuff is really frustrating because it's not true. I mean, it's verifiably the decisions that Dabo Swinney made and the moves that he made are the reason Clemson is successful. It's not like Clemson is just this perennial powerhouse that Dabo just kind of stumbled his way to the job and failed upwards. It's a frustrating battle for Clemson fans because the past 2 years have not been up to standard. So now people are just using it as an opportunity to do this little revisionist history game about all of Clemson's success the last decade. And like Clemson is, I mean, they won 21 games. They've been 21-6 the last 2 years. I mean, a lot of programs would kill to have that record over the last 2 years.
So there's a lot of different directions we could take this, and there's a lot to unpack here. So we'll start with where you ended on Dabo. Unfortunately, I think most people are incapable of arguing both sides. Like most reasonable arguments in college football, you could just throw me aside, even if I wasn't completely convicted on that side, and I could argue the side because I do my best to be objective and look at both sides. But most people, Dabo Swinney is a polarizing figure. And most of college football nation that does not root for Clemson don't like him for whatever reason. There's a number of reasons we could talk about. And therefore, obviously, because people are biased, they're going to downgrade his abilities and his performance because they just don't like him. Instead of being objective and saying, this guy's a great coach. I don't personally like him, but look at what he's done. Look at what he's accomplished. So I think that plays somewhat into it. People are always going to look for chinks in the armor of highly successful people that they don't like to bring them down. So that's one thing. In terms of the whole quarterback thing, yes, we could go all the way back to, it's a team game. And of course, we highlight and spotlight the quarterbacks more than anything. And it is the most important position on the field. There's no question. I would argue that the offensive line may be, by and large, all things being equal, it varies team to team, but for most teams, the most important positional unit. But looking at Clemson, yes, it's an oxymoron to have two generational quarterbacks at the same time. And think of if we took every quarterback in college football over the past decade that's been called a generational quarterback, by competent people, we'd have a list of 20 or 25 quarterbacks. So it's kind of a dumb term, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
And just to think that a generational quarterback can just put an otherwise 7-5 team on his back and win a national championship, I think is absurd as well. We have all sorts of examples of that not being the case, going all the way back to John Elway in his Stanford days when he could barely get to a bowl game, and he's one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. So
I would say Cam Newton was the closest I've ever seen.
It's funny you say that, because I was going to say the exact same thing. I don't think that Auburn team was anything special, but of course they had players, but nothing special. And that's exactly the guy that I was going to go to as being the closest thing. The offensive line, you would have a better grasp on that, but I've always thought that was the weakest recruited during Clemson's run.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's objectively, if you go through, and that's the thing. And I think Clemson, they made it work on the offensive line. They got some talented and some highly rated recruits, and got Mitch Hyatt was a really highly rated guy. It wasn't big enough and didn't project well to the league, but he was a very he started at left tackle for 4 years. Jackson Carman is one of the highest rated offensive line recruits that Clemson ever signed. And they had guys, they were well coached, and the system that they ran, they like to recruit smaller, more athletic guys just because of how they, because of the scheme they ran. It was a lot of, they had to move a lot, a lot of counter, and you had to be able to get out in space and block, and, a lot of getting guys out into space. And so that's kind of how Clemson recruited on the offensive line. But it worked. And they played really well together. And I think that Clemson's 2018 offensive line was one of the best in the country, I think. So that's probably the best year they've ever had an offensive line, because it was just a really great group. You go and watch that national championship game against that, Alabama's defensive line was as good as anybody's almost, and maybe second to that Clemson defensive line that year. And they gave Trevor Lawrence all the time he needed to throw. I mean, he got hit occasionally, but they didn't sack him, and he was able to sit back and read the field and find his receivers. So, but when you just look at the especially the two national championship teams, I thought they were really complete units. It wasn't really just Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson just carrying that team on their back. I will say that fourth quarter in 2016 against Alabama, Deshaun Watson, he was the difference in that fourth quarter. They were down 10 points. He was the difference in that fourth quarter. Clemson doesn't win that national title.
Absolutely.
Especially in the fashion they did without. He had some, Mike Williams and Jordan Leggett made spectacular plays on that final drive, but Deshaun Watson, he took hit after hit. That 2016 defense is probably the best defense I've ever seen that didn't end up winning the national title. But it was just a really, but either way, both teams were really complete, and it wasn't just there wasn't really one thing you could point to. There's like, wow, that's a glaring weakness that they really can't afford to, that that's one thing you can really exploit on this team. I thought both teams were really good.
The final two drives for Clemson on offense in that game are a perfect example of what I say all the time when we talk about what fans enjoy in terms of style of play and style of games. And I say this all the time, that I'm not enthralled with 45-42 games when it's just because defenses blow coverages and they can't tackle and they're overmatched. That, it's just not that appealing to me. But that is the perfect example of quarterbacks, receivers, of course, the offensive line doing their job, just being so elite and so perfect that even great defense couldn't stop it.
Yep.
And I'm not an NFL scout. I do not rate quarterbacks. I'm not the guy that can, I can pick out obvious things, of course, and I know who plays well. But I've always been a Deshaun Watson guy, even in college, and couldn't understand why he wasn't higher regarded as an NFL draft selection, because I thought, man, if he can do what he did in these last two championship games and all the other games, of course, but these two championship games against Alabama, against NFL defenses, then I don't know what we need to see out of him.
It was really strange too. The kind of the pre-draft, just going back and looking at it, just kind of some of the stuff. I mean, he turned the ball over sometimes, especially his last year. I think he threw like 17 picks his last year, which is part of the reason why he didn't end up winning the Heisman. But like, other than that, I mean, just watching the tape, I really couldn't understand why you picked Mitch Trubisky over him. I mean, Mahomes. I think Mahomes went ahead of him too, but obviously that was
sure that worked out. But I'm with you. I'm with you. I just think that sometimes it's just I think scouting in the NFL with the running quarterbacks and unorthodox quarterbacks succeeding in the last, starting probably with Russell Wilson being the first of the latest wave in the last decade or so, that it's kind of changed some thinking. But it took a long time to get past that kind of thinking that, okay, he's got to be 6'3", the ball has to look like Drew Bledsoe coming out of his hand, and it's got to be, the nose has to do the whole thing. No, it doesn't have to be. That's great, but not everybody needs to play like that.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing. Yeah, Deshaun Watson was a mobile quarterback, but he had plenty of tape of him. I mean, Clemson took tons of shot plays. I mean, he could throw. He was one of the most accurate deep ball throwers in college football while he was in college. That was like that was his thing. He hit those big plays. So it was like the pre-draft, kind of pick apart your game type thing. Sometimes it's like what your people are overthinking it. Mitch Trubisky had one okay season. And really he was only started for 1 year and ended up going number 2 overall. And you're just like, oh, okay.
And had a really good receiving core.
Yeah, he did. The defense was horrible, so I'll give him that. But I know, he all the off the field stuff, later on in his NFL career. But I saw someone mention maybe that was the reason why he didn't go so high. But I was like, there was nothing. He did nothing in college that indicate he had no off the field issues while he was at Clemson. So it is what it. There really isn't any other explanation other than what he did on the field. But it's. And I like Michael's comment. There's such thing as a program changing quarterback versus a generational quarterback. I agree. I think Deshaun Watson was a program changing quarterback. Because he was kind of that final piece, but he wasn't the only reason that Clemson ended up going on the run they did. That the pieces were being put in place long before he got there. You look at those Clemson teams before him. The one that won the ACC, the one that won the Peach Bowl and the Orange Bowl against LSU and Ohio State. Taj Boyd, DeAndre Hopkins, Sammy Watkins, Andre Ellington, like all those guys paved the way for the players and kind of established the culture that Clemson would use to win their 2 national championships. It was a building process It wasn't just oh man, Clemson is just kind of they've kind of plateaued, and now they just got 2 quarterbacks and then they were good for a little bit. It was they were already working towards that point. So.
Right, Jordan. Appreciate you being here. We've got nobody else on the line, so I am going to throw this at you if you don't mind. And certainly, I've thrown the link, as has One Scoop John. We appreciate John doing that. So the link is in the chat, everyone, if you want to talk college football. And again, I just throw a title out there as a talking point to direct the show. You know, we obviously have a Super Bowl in 1 week, so we can talk Super Bowl. I've got a lot of numbers and facts and stats both in my head and written down to connect college football and the NFL and the Super Bowl in particular, which I love to do. So we can go that route. But this astounded me. I'm working on a video that I'm going to produce here at some point soon. So would you consider a 3-game increase in win total or decrease in win total to be pretty significant from year to year?
Yes.
That's kind of where I put the barometer, the benchmark for, okay, you know, going from 6-6 to 3-9 or 9-3 seemed pretty significant to me. So 2 games, not so much, obviously. So I went with 3, and I've been tracking this from year to year because it hit me in looking at the likes of Athlons and Street and Smiths and these various magazines. They're very conservative, and I would only see them pick out 2 or 3, 4 teams, maybe 5 that they targeted as either increasing or decreasing that many wins in a particular from season to season. They were very conservative with their projections. But I started to track how many teams actually jump 3 wins or decrease 3 wins in a particular season. And it's always been in the in the Power 5, 65 teams, always been in the 17 to 22 range.
Wow.
You know what it was this past season from 21 to 22 in the Power 5, just the Power 5? How many teams increased or decreased their wins by 3? At least 3.
Well, the way you're framing this question, it sounds like there was I feel like there was an increase. It just kind of thinking of it felt like there was a lot more variance and kind of more surprise one way or the other.
27.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There was
7 of the teams out of the Big 12, 10 teams in the Big 12, 7 of them either jumped or decreased by 3 wins at least.
Wow.
7 teams in the ACC, half the conference.
Well, yeah, I knew the ACC did. Yeah, I knew the ACC had a ton.
A lot of teams. So when you project that forward, and I've been looking at this for about 5 years, and again, the numbers are usually 17 to 22, 27 just in the Power 5 last year, 21 G5 teams, so 48 in college football. So you look forward, you spin that forward to 2023, and I always find this difficult. How am I going to find 20 or 22 teams, maybe 27 teams again, that are going to increase or decrease their win totals by 3? It seems almost impossible to find those teams, but most likely they're going to be there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're going to have to, and that's the thing. And I heard Josh Pate kind of say something similar about kind of projecting teams. I mean, there's not really much skill in it, and you're never really going to accurately predict a good chunk of the college football season without sounding like a crazy person. So you would have to take some serious leaps in. And conventional wisdom about a lot of teams in order to kind of find 27 or obviously 27 was this past year, but even 22 teams that are make that kind of stark change from a yearly basis. So that's I didn't know it was that much. I felt it's more than when like you said, preseason magazines are usually really conservative about that kind of stuff, and they're like, oh, well, if they went 7-5 this year, okay, they return a lot of their team, maybe they go 8-4, 9-3, or something like that.
Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Yeah, or it's like, oh, this team lost a lot of talent. This could be a rough season for them. They were 6-6 this year. They're going to be 3-9, or 4-8. Usually don't. Yeah, they usually don't project that far. So it's like. Or they think the team's going to do more or less the same than they did last season. So it's really hard to project those kind of teams. I didn't know it was that high this past year though. I didn't guess
before I started doing that exercise. I thought I'm not going to come up with, because we all think of college football as, well, it stays the same every year. Same teams are good every year. Well, that's at the very top.
Right. Yeah, but underneath it's really anything can. I mean, who saw Tulane going from 2 wins
There
to
you go.
11 and winning the Cotton Bowl? Like that stuff doesn't. Well, obviously that had never happened before, but that's just you really can't predict it from you. And especially I think we're still kind of seeing the effects of COVID and you having all these super seniors. I think we're still kind of dealing with the residuals of that, because a lot of programs either got ahead or were put really behind the 8 ball as far as their program development from year to year. And I think that's kind of affecting kind of the variance of how many teams make these kind of jumps. And it's going to. And the thing is, we're not going to be truly rid of 6-year super seniors until 2026.
Yeah,
which is hard to believe. But so we're going to see it's going to take a long time for college football to really kind of regress to the mean, I think, as far as that's concerned.
Off the top of my head, I've never been able to find anyone else, and I didn't do ever deep research, but I've got a pretty good handle on history, and not the Cam Newton Auburn team, but the Nick Marshall Auburn team of 2013, 3-9 to the national championship game at 11-1 regular season, I think is the biggest turnaround in college football history.
Yeah, that team was. They were lucky, but that was a really impressive feat, especially when. Their program was in really bad shape when they let go of Gene Chizik, and it was just an unconventional team. And credit to Gus Malzahn, he made that team basically made that team in the 2017 team basically made his entire career at Auburn. So
oh yeah. Otherwise, he's basically 8-5 pretty much every year.
Yeah,
and going 500 in the SEC. So Jordan, I bring that up just a few months from now, if I roll out some crazy college football predictions, you're going to know why, at least.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for gearing me up for that. But
I might be taking some shots.
Hey, but it's not like this is a new thing for you. I remember when, oh man, what was that prediction you made that people still give you hell for? I think it was like 2021 that you made this prediction. I can't remember what it is now. Who did you predicted somebody to win the oh man,
because my playoff predictions have been pretty good.
It wasn't a playoff prediction.
Oh, you know what it is, and I think our next caller, just looking at his name, has reminded me. I picked Kentucky to win the SEC East.
Oh, that's what it was.
Was that in 21?
It might have been this year.
No, it wasn't in 21. No, I didn't pick them this year. No.
Okay.
And I didn't even pick them in 21 because I picked the national championship game correctly last year. Georgia, Alabama. So it wasn't in 21. It was in 20. I picked Kentucky to win the SEC East. Yeah.
Yeah,
I did.
Yeah, I just remember you getting roasted.
Oh yeah, I got hammered. I also got roasted one. If you look at the comments for my Mississippi State, for Mike Leach's first season at Mississippi State, as you recall, KJ Costello lit up LSU in Death Valley the first game out and set an SEC passing game record. And so I picked Mississippi State to go. Let's see. That was a COVID year. I picked him to go 2-8. Yeah, they played 10 games. I picked him 2-8. So after that game, the prediction video is still out there, pretty fresh. I just get roasted. Except for nobody came back to acknowledge that they went 3-7, and I was only off by a game when it was all said and done.
That was not a good team. It's funny. Talk about like that might be the least predictive performance, a quarterback performance of all time. Maybe.
Or how about the one Kenny Hill, Texas A&M?
Yeah,
his first few games.
Wow, man, that's a name I haven't heard in a long time. Wow, yeah, that was yeah. They were awful. That was that the year. That was the year after Manziel left, right?
Yeah, 2014. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Because his big 500-yard game against South Carolina was actually the
Yeah.
inaugural game on the SEC network.
Yeah. South Carolina was they were really they were highly ranked in and I think they were in the
Mhm.
top 10 in the preseason that game, and
Yeah.
A&M absolutely lit them up. I'll never forget that was a good year. That was fun to watch for obvious reasons. Um, wow. Yeah. And I hate self-deprecating, but DJ's performance against Notre Dame. Technically that was his second start, but as far as how his career played out, it wasn't
Sure.
anywhere close. That he never played that good again. Maybe the Wake Forest game that might have been, you could say that was right up there. But considering the opponent, and you're on the road and it's Notre Dame, that was a good Notre Dame team that made the playoff. You put up the most passing yards any quarterback's ever put on them, and then you have the
Yeah.
career you did. That one's got to be up there too. That should be a video. Like you should go back and like do like at least one-off quarterback performances, like the best.
That would be fun. That
Yeah.
would be fun to do. Yeah. If anyone would have said when DJ was coming off the field in Clemson, this guy's going to throw 9 touchdowns and 10 picks next year.
Yeah.
We never, like, I was sold. I was sold based on,
Me
I saw
too.
the BC game and I saw that game. Obviously, I was like, hey, they're rolling. Not that I thought he was Trevor Lawrence, but I thought good enough. They'll
Yeah.
be fine.
Mark, and I took it one step further. I was like, man, I said DJ is going to be Clemson's first Heisman winner. I said that before sometime before the 2021 season. I said he would. I didn't say he was going to win it that year. But I thought at either that year or his it would have been this year. He was going to win the Heisman. I was so convinced, and just to I still held on to hope after the Georgia game, but once by the fourth fifth game of the season, it was clear that this team won he wasn't he wasn't playing very good, and the team wasn't very good. At least to Clemson standards, they weren't very good. It was still a fine team, but the offense was brutal. That's one of and I've seen Clemson in worse shape, but that was probably the hardest season of Clemson football I've ever watched. Was 2021. And I think it's just because of how good that defense was. What they allowed 13 points a game that year. It was pretty much the reason Clemson won most of their games. That was a championship defense that was completely wasted by borderline inept offensive play for most of the year.
Well, yeah, as a fan, there are two different types of frustrations when your offense is awful and the defense is good, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And yes, if your baseball team can't hit and you lose every game 2-1 or 1-0, or your offense sucks and you lose, or you're struggling against marginal teams and winning 17-14 and then losing because you can't score. Yeah, that's just a frustration when your defense is going out there and doing the job, or your basketball team can't shoot and can't score, but they play good defense and you're losing, 55-52 every night.
That's the Clemson basketball experience for most of Brad Brownell's tenure. So that's pretty funny.
All right, Jordan, we've got a bit of a lineup working now. So
awesome. All right.
We appreciate you being here. Are you guys, you and Tiger Paw Craven, getting together on Thursday?
Yep. Same time as usual. Yeah, guys, check that out on the Clemson channel. Me and Tiger Paw Craven go live every Thursday night at 7 p.m. Clemson, the Clemson Tigers All In Show. We've rebranded it. So make sure you guys check that out if you're interested. Please sub that channel up, and I think we're at 4,000 subscribers now, trying to get to 5 by the end of the off season. So make sure you guys tune in, and if you're interested to hear the Clemson fan perspective on everything that's going on within the program this off season. So yeah.
All right, Jordan. Appreciate you being here.
Talk to you later.
Yeah, one more time. Jordan Bowman, Tiger Paw Craven, Clemson Live, all in. They've rebranded it. They made an executive decision there. All in on the Clemson channel Thursday at 7 Eastern. Even if you're not all in on Clemson, if you're all in on college football talk and you want to hear about, a program you hate, if you're a South Carolina fan, you're another ACC rival, join those guys on Thursday night on the Clemson channel. I'm guessing some of you are watching not even knowing that I've got team channels. We've got team channels of 25 of them. About 15 of them are functional. All right. We will outline more programming and scheduling items later. For right now, we got more football talk. We got the real MVP on the line.
Hey, Mark, how you doing today?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm dejected, man. It's been a tough day.
Uh-oh.
The NFC beat the AFC in the Pro Bowl.
Big AFC fan. Okay. I used to care about such things when I was about 8. Gotcha. Okay.
Big Kansas City fan in particular.
Well, I know you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, so you're going to be hopefully a little more amped at this time next week as opposed to rooting for the AFC today.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, Mark, is the difference between what I think Kansas City is and what Los Angeles is or was when they had that great team with Odell Beckham, Jalen Ramsey, Donald, and Stafford is this game is just part of the bigger process. It's not about this game. It's about what's going to be in 5 years, 10 years, because we're not just chasing 1 or 2. We're chasing Tom Brady. I want Patrick Mahomes II to be the GOAT.
Whoa.
I want Travis Kelce to be the GOAT. I want Andy Reid to be the GOAT.
Okay. All right. You had me on the first one. I was following along. The second one, okay, we're still in the ballpark of having some level of conversation, but all due respect to Andy Reid, you lost me on the third one.
You don't think Andy Reid can catch Bill Belichick?
He's won a Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, but with Philadelphia, he took a lot of those Eagles teams to the NFC title game.
I watched him, sure.
So he's a good coach. He's a great coach.
Absolutely.
And if he wins, let's say 6 Super Bowls with Kansas City, there's a legitimate discussion, I feel like, between him and Bill.
He's won 1 Super Bowl, and you've got him projected to 6.
At least 6 should be the goal.
How old is Andy Reid?
I don't know. I mean, listen, we've got 6 years.
You're not Alabama in college football.
Kansas City has hosted the last 5 AFC championship games.
Hosting 5 consecutive AFC championship games and winning 6 Super Bowls are 2 completely different things.
Yeah, but it's on the right track. It's on the right track.
I hear the sarcasm in your voice, so that's why I'm letting you continue.
You listen, but the goal for Kansas City isn't just this one game. Maybe 6 is too much, but we should be able to win more than 1. I mean, come on. If Kansas City at the end of Patrick Mahomes' tenure only wins this Super Bowl and doesn't win any more Super Bowls, to me, he's a disappointment.
Oh, wow. I get your point because he's so remarkable and he's so young still. I get your point, but if he throws for 75,000 yards and whatever the numbers turn out to be, and he's won 2 Super Bowls, let's say he gets back to 1 more and loses, and he goes 2-2 in Super Bowls, that's Peyton Manning's career.
Yeah, but I don't look at him like Peyton Manning. I want him to be Tom Brady. I mean, there's a legitimate argument if Patrick Mahomes wins this Super Bowl, he's what? A top 5 quarterback all time already?
He's pushing. You can make that argument. I wouldn't have him quite there statistically.
Oh, yeah, statistically, he's miles away from all the greats. But I'm just talking about...
Well, in terms of stats, quality stats, he's not. He is in that realm. Talking about compiling stats, like his passer rating and his TD to pick ratio and all that is astronomical. He might have the #1 passer rating in history. I know that Aaron Rodgers had it here recently, and I think Mahomes passed him. So I think he's statistically the greatest passer of all time if you're just talking about efficiency rating.
Right. But to me, if he's got all these great per game achievements and the team as a whole only goes to one more Super Bowl, I mean, that's disappointing to me.
Well, I get your point again, but if you're looking at what the NFL has been, and that's, except for the Patriots, a very difficult, these runs that teams go on with great players are very brief. Steelers with Bradshaw, Cowboys with Staubach, Cowboys with Aikman, 49ers with Montana. We can go through the 6 or 7 examples. They're quick spurts. They're like 3 or 4 years. Brady's the one guy that had close to 20 years. Did have 20 years.
Yeah, I know. Well, I didn't say it'd be easy, Mark. Greatness and being the GOAT is hard to achieve in any sport.
Absolutely.
But
and really, I would argue that Tom Brady, he should be given that title. I personally do not think he is the greatest of all time, but he is the most accomplished. He is the greatest in terms of his accomplishments. Yes. I don't believe he played the position better than everyone in history myself.
I think personally, Aaron Rodgers is probably a greater individual player, but Aaron Rodgers didn't win enough. The goal of any sport is to win. And Tom Brady did that at a higher level than anybody else.
But we only evaluate that position that way. We don't like evaluate offensive linemen, and when we talk about the Hall of Fame and say, "Oh, he won, he was a great offensive lineman, but he only won 1 Super Bowl, and this other offensive lineman won 4 Super Bowls, so he's better." We don't do that with any other position.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's just when you're at that stratosphere of level, I think that's just the way it becomes.
Well, it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't. I didn't say it was fair or
like
unfair.
to talk about what should be. I don't like to talk about the way things are if they're not correct.
Well, I get you there, Mark, and I can agree with you, but that's just the reality of the situation for Mahomes.
We have kind of a highbrow show here. We kind of look down on other levels of thinking sometimes, I'll admit.
Well, LBC Trojan said Andy Reid is 64 years old, and he has coached 24 years in the NFL with 1 Super Bowl. Winning 6 more is a reach. Well,
yeah, when you've won 1.
Yeah, but did Andy Reid have Patrick Mahomes before then? How many championship games in the conference did he make before Patrick Mahomes? And how many has he made afterwards?
Well, he made 3 in a row in Philadelphia.
Yeah. Well, he's made 5 in the last 5 years.
I think maybe 3 out of 4 years, I think. And then he did Alex Smith ever go to an AFC championship game? I don't think so, right?
I don't believe so.
Not with he did with San Francisco, but not.
There were some brutal playoff losses in there.
Yeah, there were.
Kansas City lost a game where they scored 2 touchdowns. The other team scored 0 touchdowns.
What game was that?
They played Pittsburgh. They had 6 field goals.
That's right. Yeah.
They lost another one where the quarterback of Tennessee threw a pass to himself and completed it for a touchdown.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, they were the 1 seed a couple times and blew it. Yeah, they were good. I liked those teams, but they weren't. They had some bad playoff losses for sure.
Yeah, they lost to the Colts one year. I think they had a 28. They had some massive lead.
38-10.
Yeah, 38-10 and lost it.
Biggest playoff lead ever. Yes. No. Houston, Buffalo, 92 playoffs. Yeah. Second largest
biggest
lead ever.
Loss or blown lead of all time happened this year with the Colts.
Oh, well, yes, that was the 27-0 game.
Yeah.
Oh.
This year it was like 33 points.
During the regular season. Yes, the Vikings-Colts game. Yeah.
I didn't even know you could blow that big of a lead, to be honest with you, Mark. I thought there was just a threshold, but.
Well, yes, there has to be some kind of time limitation that it's
impossible. I thought 33 points was it, but apparently not.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I know. But did you notice something Cincinnati's done that Philadelphia hasn't? Cincinnati went on this whole trash talking tour. disrespecting Arrowhead, calling it Burrowhead and all that stuff. And Philadelphia hasn't done that. So, Mark, how much does trash talking play into a factor in football games, do you think?
Well, I'm, of course, going to tell you that it depends on the situation and the individuals involved. Some people's psyche is rather frail, and they're affected by trash talking, and others are able to actually have the trash talking against them motivate them, or they just disregard it completely. But overall, I think there's I hate to admit it, but I think the trash talking has impact on games because guys are human. And I think guys get in other guys' heads. Absolutely.
Right. So now I've talked about the greatest team, hopefully, of all time, Kansas City. Let me talk about some college football, Mark.
Okay. All
West
right.
Virginia football, okay? I'm going to
Wow.
make a hard turn to West Virginia. I gave you a team last time in Utah that I think would be in the top 25 and finish out of it. West Virginia is the opposite way. I think they will be out of the top 25 but finish in it. And the reason is simple.
Wow.
Their schedule, the way I look at their schedule is, hey, they play Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and UCF. Last year, all of those teams were group of 5 teams or independent teams. I don't think they've received much of the benefits of being in the Big 12 yet. So those should be 4 wins. And then I think they played Townsend or something like that. That should be 5 wins right there for West Virginia.
I'm still trying to figure out what the benefits are to being in the Big 12. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, compared to the AAC, I think there's got to be some.
All right.
So those are 5 wins. So if they go what? Get 3 more wins, 4 more wins in the actual normal Big 12, the original Big 12, which I think is doable for them.
I don't think West Virginia is a very good football team.
I'm trying to give them hope, Mark. I'm trying to find teams that can make it, that haven't, and it's hard to do. So I'm just trying to present some differences. But do you like the logic of, hey, if you're in the Big 12 and you play the 4 newcomers, you're going to have an easier time?
Generally, sure. But I don't expect those to be the 4 worst teams in the conference. I think maybe Houston might be this first year.
I don't see any of them outside of BYU being competitive because BYU is the closest that plays a Power 5 schedule. So I think they'll all fall in the lower third of the Big 12.
Well, that makes sense. I don't have a whole lot of confidence in Scott Satterfield, for one thing. And Gus Malzahn obviously knows his stuff. Let's see. I'm trying to think of his quarterback's coming back, John Rice Plumlee. It's an extremely balanced. It is by far the most balanced league. And there's going to injuries and just, I don't believe in luck per se, but there is such a thing as being lucky. Like, I don't think a person or a team has luck that another team doesn't have. But in a given game, you can be lucky and the other team cannot be lucky. I believe in that because it's just circumstantial. It doesn't carry throughout the season. But I just think that I think all those teams are. I think you're looking at the best team in that conference is about the 15th best team in the country. I'm trying to think who I just completed my way too early top 25. I'm going to release that here pretty soon. I'm trying to think who I had best in the Big 12. It was either TCU or Kansas State. No, it's probably Texas. So the best team in the Big 12 is like the 15th best team in the country, and the worst teams, the 50th best team in the country, 55.
Yeah, so I think if they get some luck on their side and with their schedule, I think it could lead to them being a top 25 team.
Wow. Yeah, I don't see that right now.
It could. Listen, there's going to be some teams in the top 25 we look back on that said, how did they end up there? from the beginning of the season to the end. There's always a few surprises, it feels like. So
Oh, did you hear my earlier conversation about the 3-win barrier in terms of
yeah,
increase or decrease? 27 teams last
Yeah.
year. So, yeah, I may come up and roll the dice and really come out with some outrageous predictions just because history is proving that there are going to be a lot of teams that are going to take off and other teams that are going to crash. And people are going to call me crazy, and I'm going to miss some of them, but I'm going to hit on some other ones. But there's going to be about 20 teams that are going to, and the first one I'm looking at is Purdue, 8-4 last year. Down the chutes.
The Purdue fan that calls in all the time better not hear you, Mark. He'll
Yeah. Oh, I'm
go
going
on
to be in trouble
a rant.
with our guy Michael. Yes.
Yeah, I know. He's probably disappointed. Cincinnati could be on that end of the spectrum. I don't know what they're doing. I mean, to me, they downgraded a coach significantly.
Yes.
Scott Satterfield, I don't understand that hire. Like Louisville, I think got the better end of the deal.
Oh, Louisville did, yes.
Yeah, so that doesn't make sense to me. I think Cincinnati could have got Jeff Braun, Maybe it's just me.
No, Jeff Brom's an alumni of Louisville.
I understand that,
he's
Mark,
wanted to
but
go back there.
I think they could have got that type of caliber coach.
Oh. Well, Scott Satterfield had a decent run at Louisville, a marginal run. I'll call it marginal.
Yeah, I think he was like one game above 500.
Mediocre. Yeah.
I wouldn't call that great.
No, well, no, I wouldn't. I didn't even call it decent.
So that's all I got for you, Mark. Hopefully next week I'll be on here celebrating Kansas City's big blowout win. Hopefully Patrick Mahomes will do a behind the back pass.
Yeah, that would be nifty.
Yeah, cement himself as the greatest moment in maybe Super Bowl history. That'd be nice.
Very nice, DeReal. Appreciate you being here. And yes, we will go live after the Super Bowl next week. And I'm just going to tease everyone. I poured myself into some of these Super Bowl. Most of these came off the top of my head in terms of Super Bowl. So, and then we're going to bring in our next caller here. I tested myself as I was rising and shining early in the morning, and I thought, yeah, I'm going to do this Super Bowl connection to college football. And the first thing I thought of is, can I name I know I can name all the quarterbacks who have started Super Bowl games, but I thought, can I name all their colleges? So I did nail that. I went through all the Super Bowls, and I will just throw out some obscure colleges and universities, and you guys, try to figure out who may have been starting quarterbacks at the likes of what is now Louisiana Monroe, Louisiana Tech, what at the time was either Northeast or Southeast Louisiana. Then we have Augustana being repped in the NFL in the Super Bowl by a quarterback. Augustana, I don't believe they play football anymore. We have Morehead State, of course. We have Alcorn State. We've got Grambling. So just to throw some of those out there for you. LFG, yes. Terry Bradshaw played at one of those Louisiana schools. I get them mixed up. Louisiana Tech, I believe. #1 pick in the draft. Yes. Very good, LFG. Kenny Anderson played at Augustana. The Truth, Steve McNair, Alcorn State. Phil Sims, thank you, LFG. Nice job, Morehead State. Doug Williams, LBC Trojan. Yes, Grambling, Super Bowl MVP in 1988. Yes. Well done, guys. Well done. LFG, the Mike Barber TD catch, no call helped unreservedly advance the Steelers on the way to one of their Super Bowl wins. So, okay, LFG, if I'm not mistaken, I believe you're talking about a play that involved Mike Renfro. back of the corner, end zone, Three Rivers Stadium. That was the impetus to instant replay being part of officiating in the NFL. So 1978 NFC or AFC Championship game in Pittsburgh. The Oilers would have tied the game against the Steelers. Mike Renfro pulled in a pass. They had the still by still shots in Sports Illustrated. They, of course, had the replay a zillion times on NBC. Dick Enberg probably doing the call. Yes, Mike Renfro, number 82. Houston, Pittsburgh, their second. They played in 2 consecutive AFC Championship games. The first one was a blowout by the Steelers, 34-5 in the rain at Three Rivers. And the second one was, of course, the Mike Renfro play. Unless you're thinking of another play, but that's got to be the play that you're thinking of, and that was Mike Renfro. Yakov stopping by to talk some football with us.
Hello, Mark. It's great to see you here.
Good to see you. What's going on?
Well, I saw your title here, and I thought I would, try to make a little connection here between. I know you always say you don't have to follow the exact title, but between the Super Bowl and college football. So, Mark, I thought I'd start out. One of the things I think are most interesting are frigid games. I've always been, fascinated by, the ice bowl type of games.
Yeah.
And the first one I remember, Mark, is the 1982 AFC Championship game between obviously Cincinnati and San Diego. I believe that's known as the Freezer Bowl. Yeah, I just looked it up, and I knew it was very cold, but apparently the wind chill got up to 50 degrees below zero at times throughout the game when they had wind gusts.
27-7.
Right,
Cincinnati.
that's right. I do remember that's the first year I really did follow football at any level, and I do remember that day, Mark. That as you know, I grew up in Canton, just a few miles down the road from you. I remember it being an absolutely frigid day. Obviously, if it's 50 degrees below zero in Cincinnati, it's not 40 degrees in Canton. I don't know if it was exactly 50, but it was relatively similar. I'm sure in Stowe that day, if you remember, I'm sure it was a frigid day. And I remember, Mark, one of the things I would do is I tried to pretend that I was always interested when the players would come out from the tunnel, especially in those days. Most of the stadiums were also the dugout too. But you come out and you'd see their breath, and I would exit our front door, much to my mom's chagrin, because she kept telling me, put on gloves, I was only 8 years old at the time, put on a cap, put on a jacket, put on gloves. Yeah. I kept running in and out of our front door, pretending I was, entering Riverfront Stadium, to the roar of the crowd. And that was a good game. And of course, I know the second game of that day, probably I'm not going to talk about that too much. I know that was a difficult day for you.
You remember that, Yakov. You've got a good memory. You've picked up on a few things I've said, because I was going to say, of course, they were both championship games, but the day is better known for the second game in San Francisco.
Yeah,
yes.
That was obviously a far more competitive game. And by the way, I don't know if you've ever seen that, Mark. I should send it to you, but there's a picture of how would he have been then? Like maybe
Tom
5
Brady.
or 6 years old. Tom Brady with his mom
game.
with the final score, right behind them. Again, I'm not going to dwell on that because I let that rest, let that settle. I mean, you've already dealt with that for 40 years. But another thing I remember, Mark, is in 1985. Now, again, I know I'm not talking about the Super Bowl. I'm talking about playoff games. But when the Bears played the Giants.
Sure.
Oh, I should say this real fast. Remember in 1981, also when I barely remember when the Browns lost to Oakland on a frigid game. And I remember my dad being collapsed my dad and my grandfather and great uncle being kind of collapsed on the couch.
Sure. Yeah.
Right after the interception. That was also a frigid day. And
icy.
Yes. Our next door neighbor, who was I know he's an infectious disease doctor. I assume he's probably retired by now, but he said that his feet were still cold till last summer. I mean, obviously he was joking, but I remember him saying that we saw him the next day, and he said my feet are, didn't warm up till July. Yeah. It was so cold that day. And another one I'll tell you, Mark. I know I'm talking too much. I'd like to hear you.
Oh, you're good.
Is remember in the '85 NFC divisional title game between the Giants and the Bears? That was also a
windy.
Baseball. Yeah, very windy. I think I just looked up. It was about 20 below zero. And that Steve McMichael told the defense that no one's allowed to wear sleeves. He said if they try to put on sleeves, he's going to take a scissor and rip it off, cut it off. So I just looked it up. I was watching some of the game, and they had the offense was, but no defensive players were allowed to wear sleeves, not for warm-ups and not for the actual game. And I guess it turned out all right. They didn't give up any points. So
that was they didn't give up any points in the playoffs that year.
That's right. Yeah.
Two shutouts for the vaunted Bears the defense under Buddy Ryan, and that was a game with the infamous Sean Landetta whiffed punt.
That's funny. I went to YouTube and just clicked in the middle, and that's exactly it went right there of all things. And I hadn't thought about that in 20 years or so. But yeah, the whiff punt, and I think they got a score right after that. But and then in the Super Bowl there, Mark, they gave up 10 points, but one was a fumble at the beginning of the game. And they had since New England didn't even get a first down. I think they got like 2-3 yards in their in their 3 plays, and they kicked the field goal because that was already in range.
Yeah.
And the next touchdown the guy was already, but it was already 46-3, so that was a meaningless touchdown. So basically, you could say they gave up 3 points from the turnover in field goal range, and other than that, they gave up a touchdown when it was 46-3.
Meaningless. Yeah.
So in some way they aren't scored upon in three playoff games.
Yes, remarkable run by the Bears.
Yeah.
Yes,
I do think though, Mark, looking back on it almost 40 years later, that's unfortunate. Not necessarily cheering for him. That I think with that much talent, they probably should have put together another Super Bowl win or two. It was the greatest one-year team, but they were good. I think they lost the next year, maybe San Francisco, and then they lost to Washington.
They lost to the Redskins 2 consecutive years, 86 and 87. They lost and they were the 1 seed.
Right.
And Walter Payton's last game was against the Redskins in 87. Darrell Green had a big punt return for a touchdown. Then they lost to Jerry Rice 28-3. They were the 1 seed the next year in 88. So they were still really good.
Yeah.
But they got blown out by the Niners in a extremely cold game.
Yes, that was an ice bowl too. It was cold in Canton that day too. I remember that. And one other Super Bowl memory I'll ask you, Marcus. I used to love this, starting from 82 probably is when I really was old enough to follow. But you remember ESPN? Now they couldn't do it anymore. First, I barely ever watch ESPN unless it's for game day, but unless it's for actual games. But they would start off with Super Bowl 1, and they show. I think it was a half-hour clips. I loved that. I watched that from let's say 82 till the early 90s. I'd watch the whole day. It was only 20-some Super Bowls back then.
Wait a minute, you wouldn't watch the years that before you were a fan? You wouldn't?
Oh, I started with the Green Bay versus Kansas City.
Okay.
Yeah. I watched everything.
Okay.
I watched everything, but I love those little half-hour segments.
Oh, yes. Those are phenomenal.
Yeah. Now it would take days because there's 50-some Super Bowls, but in those days there were, depending on when you started.
20, 25.
Yeah, 20.
Sure.
So,
half hour each.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I remember that too. Absolutely. Would love watching those and I would after years would have them basically memorized, but I could still just sit there and watch them.
That was tremendous. Yeah. Mark, do you think when I look back on those Bears games, I'm going to try to end here because I know you have other people and when I look back on especially the playoffs games, to me sometimes I think the NFL was more interesting in the 80s, but at the same time for college football, maybe because there was just so few games on, I think it's better now. But when I look back on the NFL in the 1980s, I find it more interesting than current. Right now I just watch the games. I don't follow the story. Back then I followed every news I could. I guess I can't find something comparable to watching a 1980s playoff game that I now. But when I watch, let's say I watched Georgia and Notre Dame, I was like, oh my God, they completed a 10-yard pass. That's amazing. The 1980 Sugar Bowl. I mean, I don't remember that. I barely remember that game, but it seems like to me, college football is more exciting, but the NFL is maybe less exciting to me. Maybe because I was 10 and now I'm 48, but
yeah, it's really hard for me to judge because I'm so much more nostalgic for that time.
Yeah, same here.
Like I was waiting for a guest the other day, and so I'm just sitting here waiting, and I just punched in 1978 NFL playoffs just so I could watch whatever popped up. I was going to start watching it, and I'm not going to throw in. Not that it would be torture. I watched the games at the time and enjoyed them, but I wouldn't throw up the 2009 NFL playoffs, and it
Right.
wouldn't impact me the same way.
Would the 1981 Orange Bowl impact you the same way as current football?
Oh, absolutely.
It would. Okay.
I'm nostalgic for that too.
And I am
Yeah.
too, Mark. I just thought maybe I liked it more, but I liked it then for sure. It's not the same as the NFL now compared to 30, 40 years ago for me.
I also like watching games that uh, that preceded my time as a fan.
So that for you, that would probably be sometime in the 70s, maybe late
Yeah,
70s. Yeah.
like I'll throw up the 74 NFC championship game or something. So that was like 4 years before. 78 was really the first season I remember watching and intently.
Right.
So I'll pick a game before that, and I'm intrigued by watching the same players, but before I was, and seeing how the broadcast played out and all of
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. And I will say also, Mark, that in those days, 1980s for me, 70s a little too young, but as much as I love the playoffs now, especially if Ohio State is involved, I thought of January 1st as a
Oh yeah,
mecca. Yeah,
it's
nothing. The playoffs are great, but when I could
yeah,
watch the Capital, whatever they called it, the Citrus Bowl and the Hall of Fame Bowl, and
yeah.
then all the way, and then you see the Rose Bowl, and then I think the Sugar and Orange Bowl were on at the same time. Remember that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think when they
I
got away
remember
from that.
I remember
So
getting up and changing the channel, and my grandma tell me which one to put it on, and she was I was the human remote, but
when I first watched, the Cotton Bowl was on at like noon, and the Sugar Bowl was on like 2:30 or 3, and then the Rose Bowl and the Orange Bowl was on by itself late. And then they moved the Sugar Bowl. The first Sugar Bowl that was played at night, I believe, was the Michigan Auburn game in '83. Was the
right.
first nighttime Sugar Bowl, and yeah, you'd had to flip back and forth between the Orange Bowl and the Sugar Bowl for a long time.
And then when would the Fiesta Bowl have been on?
So the Fiesta Bowl, I'm trying to think, the first year that it was a New Year's Day game would have been 80. I know Ohio State played in the 80 Fiesta Bowl,
Oh yeah,
and it was on Christmas Day.
interesting. Right.
I still remember having to travel from my home to my grandma's house because we kind of like, okay, open gifts, then we're going to go see grandma. And we left during the Fiesta Bowl, it's just killing me. I'm listening to the radio.
Right. Yeah.
And I still think it wasn't a New Year's Day. It was about 82, 83. Maybe that's Marcus Dupree, Oklahoma, Arizona
Right, yeah.
State game in 82. The Buckeyes played in 83 against Pitt.
Okay.
That
Yes,
was
that's
a
right.
New
Yeah.
Year's Day
Yeah.
game. So by I think 82 was the first Fiesta Bowl on New Year's Day.
Okay. So one of the best things about that day, Mark, it was unlike now. I felt like you think if you had a show back then, if this technology was around 40 years ago, but there was like multiple teams that could hold up a trophy and feel like that was a championship season.
Yes.
If you won the Rose Bowl, you won the Sugar Bowl, you won the Orange Bowl, even if you just won the depending on your situation, if you just won the Citrus Bowl, I had to think about Capital One, but there was like 6 teams that could feel like we had a championship level season. But now, again, they're going back, but that doesn't, especially if you're a team that thought you had playoff hopes and now you're just in a New Year's Six. What do they call it now? Yeah, New Year's Six game. You don't hold up that Sugar Bowl trophy, and hey, we are almost champs. We're like semi-national champs or something like that. Maybe if you're let's say Coastal Carolina made it and they won the Sugar Bowl.
Yeah.
That's
Tulane.
Tulane.
Winning the Cotton Bowl this year. Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't have 6 to 8 teams celebrating it as if this is one of the finest seasons of all time for their program. Now you only have one, but let's say 2 teams to make the semifinals, and basically, yeah, it's not. I can't compare it. I guess I didn't think that through properly how to compare it, but I can't. But certainly not 6 to 8 teams that feel it.
I think I would have a fairly decent shot of fixing that, but not with the current conditions and where the sport's headed being able to fix it and still make all that meaningful and still accommodate what everyone wants and this 12-team playoff and all that.
Right.
I just think it's lost.
I used to even love like watching like here's a name you haven't heard, like the Blue Bonnet Bowl,
Absolutely.
the Freedom Bowl. I think there might have been a Cherry Bowl for a while.
Cherry
love
Bowl.
Yeah.
Michigan State and Army played in a Cherry Bowl. Yeah, in
Yeah.
'85 with Lorenzo White.
I used to get the Canton Repository. We got it every day in early December, and I would cut out the bowl schedule. And I kept that in the bathroom, I guess, when I was for reading material. I would
nice.
just keep
Good
on
job.
looking at that. Hey, what's
Yeah.
going on? What's going on? And,
Oh man, yeah.
yeah. Now I would never think. First of all, I'd be looking at a phone, but I wouldn't even do that because it wouldn't be that interesting to me. And I watched the games, but I certainly, again, I'm 48, not 10, but that wouldn't interest me beyond looking at it once or twice now.
Yes, watching a bowl game on a Thursday night after Christmas on December 27th on Raycom Sports, that was just phenomenal. Liberty Bowl.
Right.
Oh yes, yeah.
Mark, I love doing this with you, but you have a lot of callers, and I respect that. So I'm gonna let you go.
Thank you, Yakov. I appreciate you
Okay.
showing up. It's always nice to hear from you and see you and relive some good memories.
That's right, Mark. Get on your next caller. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's funny Yakov says that because I've certainly received the feedback recently that I take too long on these calls, and I get it. I do take too long in these calls. I want to keep them to maybe 5 minutes, depending on their level of interest. But yeah, we'll keep it going here at the Voice of College Football, and I'm still going to draw some conclusions here. I still have some things to say about college football and the Super Bowl. Want to remind everyone to grab the Amazon link. You guys are probably so sick of hearing this. The Amazon link, it's in the description section of all the videos. Do your Amazon shopping. Use that link. Put it somewhere where you will remember it, because I know the best of intentions, and then you forget, because I know I would. So put the Amazon link somewhere where you will remember it when you go shopping. Welcome into the Voice of College Football.
How's it going, Mark?
It's going well. Who am I talking to here? Who is
It's
it?
Dr. C.
Oh, it's Dr. C. Yes. I'm sorry. Absolutely.
That's okay. Let's see. I had a couple of questions, just some random stuff as always. And I wrote them down here for
I like
you.
random. Good.
All right. So looking back, I watched now the college football season's over. I watched some of the old football as we're talking about the NFL right now. 2000 Ravens. Would you agree that's the greatest defense of all time?
No.
No? Who would you put above the, Ray Lewis in his prime or very young?
I will put Jack Lambert, Jack Ham, Mean Joe Green, LC Greenwood, Ernie Holmes, Dwight White, Donnie Shell, Mel Blunt, the 76 Steeler defense. You could go anywhere from 74 through 79, but really the 76 defense was the most dominant. For one particular season, Yakov and I were talking about the 85 Bears.
Yeah,
they basically shut everyone out in the playoffs and the Super Bowl.
But one of the things, obviously we can't build a time machine, and it's unfortunate, but that 2000 Ravens team had the athleticism and the speed and play with the speed of the game that could compete in today's NFL. I don't think you could say that for the 76.
Okay,
Steelers.
So if you're going to go that route, that's a whole different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Then that's a whole different discussion, because that's the type discussion based on having this conversation with 1 million people over the years, that people generally evaluate skill level and talent and the increase in speed and athleticism and all that based on their time reference, their age.
Mm-hmm.
So what's to tell us that the 2000 Ravens, that was now 22 years ago, 22 years prior to that was the 1978 Steelers, that there hasn't been just as much of a decline in athleticism going back 22 years as there was going another 22 years back before that.
Yeah, I think one thing I think people forget is that humans haven't changed that much. I think what has changed, though. I think the athletes of today, they're being treated better as far as injury. The recovery is, concussions are taken semi seriously. In the past, you got a concussion and you were back in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So those Ravens were playing 22 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I get your point. They were great. The Giants did nothing in the Super Bowl against that defense. Their touchdown was a kickoff return touchdown, so they got shut out. Their offense in the Super Bowl. So I'm right there with you. I'm not knocking your pick, and I still remember that season's AFC Championship game against the Raiders, and John Gruden was a mastermind at calling plays and running an offense, and they were completely overmatched. Well, they lost Rich Gannon for one thing, but still, they were completely overmatched in that game by the Ravens. The Ravens might not have made the Super Bowl that year, but they were a wild card. They played after they beat the Broncos in the wild card game. They played the Eddie George and the Titans and Steve McNair, and they were losing sometime in like the fourth quarter. And I know they had a big fumble return, and then Ray Lewis, I think, had an interception too, and then they flipped the game over.
Well, I mean, to that point, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I don't know how good their offense was, but that offense for the Ravens was one of the worst offenses maybe in NFL history. I believe they had 4 games, if not more, where the offense did not score a touchdown.
Yeah, that's a great point. So the Steelers Super Bowl teams, excuse me, had really good offenses to great offenses, but the team that I'm citing in 76, there's some ridiculous statistics about the 76 Steelers defense. They didn't give up like a touchdown for like 7 consecutive games or something like that, but they didn't win the Super Bowl that year. They had too many injuries on offense, and they lost the AFC Championship game. But you bring up a good pick with the Ravens of 2000, which is probably the last, I want to say, the last great defense. Those Patriots defenses, the first 3 Super Bowl winners were strong. But yeah, that was kind of the last great defense.
Well, yeah, and there was the Ravens, and then the other team I followed that had a fantastic defense were the Buccaneers.
Sure. Well, yeah, 2 years later. Yes, the Buccaneers, of course. Yes.
They had the same problem. They had the same quarterback that the Ravens did for a long time. Trent Dilfer. He was their quarterback. And
well, I mean, he was not their quarterback when they won the Super Bowl, but you're right that their playoff failures were with Trent Dilfer, and then they got Brad Johnson and they won the Super Bowl.
Yeah. And I mean, Brad Johnson was not he was a capable quarterback, and that's all they needed to get to the Super Bowl. Of course they got Keyshawn, which helped out. But until that, the Buccaneers were going playoff after playoff, playing fantastic defense. But I mean, I remember watching those teams for so long. They relied on Grammatica to score for points.
Yes. Everyone in the chat should, every time we mention a player playing in the Super Bowl, they should try to name the college team. So you got Martin Grammatica. Didn't he kick for Kansas State?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And then, of course, you got Brad Johnson, Florida State, Keyshawn Johnson, USC.
Yes.
Derek
about Keyshawn Johnson. I remember him playing up against Northwestern in the Rose Bowl. And I mean, it was man against kids.
Yeah.
That guy was a freak. Going back, hey, in the 2000, the greatest show on turf, the Rams, did they play modern style football offense?
No,
No.
no, not from the standpoint of they weren't in shotgun almost every play. They had a tight end. They didn't run tempo. But from the standpoint of how prolific they were or how
Yeah.
many times they threw the ball,
Yeah, because they
absolutely.
threw it so much, compared to, everybody going the two. I mean, people wanted to run it 3 times, honestly, back in the
Well,
2000s.
it's funny because can I ask you, Dr. C, how old you are?
I'm 41.
Okay. So I got a few years on you. See, I look back at the NFL at that point and considered it a passing league, even looking back. And I know that the numbers weren't quite what they are now, but you were just coming off of Dan Marino and you had the launch of Tom Brady's career and you had Drew Bledsoe and Kurt Warner and a bunch of other guys throwing for a lot of yardage, Vinny Testaverde and others. I don't think I bet that they didn't throw the ball that much more than other teams because Marshall Faulk was running for 15, 16, 1700 yards a season.
He was phenomenal.
They just threw it so much better than everybody. And it's unfortunate because Kurt Warner, they win that Super Bowl. The next season, they, of course, I'm losing it here. 1999, they win the Super Bowl. 2000, they played the Saints, and they had a rash of miscues, and they made this dramatic comeback. And if Zakir, I can't think of how to pronounce his name. Hakeem was his last name. Zahir Hakeem.
Rocket was, no.
Punt returner.
Yeah.
Anyway, he fumbled a punt that blew the game and they couldn't come back and win. So they lost a wild card game the next year. Then, of course, 2 years after their Super Bowl win is when they were supposed to win another Super Bowl and lost to the Patriots.
Yeah.
Kurt Warner had just a remarkable and strange career.
Out of a movie, which they did make a movie about.
Yes.
I mean, what a phenomenal story.
Yes. Strange in that he ever had a chance. And then once he got his chance, they had a 3-year run that was remarkable. But then he kind of went downhill, had some injuries. The team had injuries. They just went off the cliff. And then he finds himself in New York a couple of years later. They make him the starting quarterback. He only plays half a season. They bench him because they were ready to take on with Eli. And then he finds himself in Arizona, and they had never won anything, and they weren't expected to do anything. And he takes them to the Super Bowl. And if not for Santonio Holmes and Ben Roethlisberger, he had another remarkable Super Bowl game against the Steelers. He played 3 great Super Bowl games. He threw for in the 400-yard range in all 3 Super Bowls, and for a long time had the passing record in the Super Bowl. He threw for like 430-something in one of those games.
Ben Roethlisberger, I think underrated in the sense that no one brings him up as one of the greats. I don't think he's in the class, but he was phenomenal when he played.
Yeah. He played in 3 Super Bowls, 1, 2. Yep.
And very difficult he's very mobile, hard to take down because of his size. Had an arm. Man, what a great get for that franchise.
Dan Beast Media, nice job playing along there. Yes, Ben Roethlisberger, Miami of Ohio.
Yeah.
Kurt Warner, Northern Iowa.
I knew Kurt was Iowa, but I didn't know where. I could not for the life of me think of where he went to college.
Larry Fitzgerald scored the touchdown that would have won the Super Bowl, of course.
Out of Pitt.
Yes, very nice. And then, of course, Santonio Holmes.
Where did Holmes go? Where was he from?
Really? I thought I was tossing you a layup there. Santonio Holmes. No?
Ohio State?
Ohio State. Absolutely.
Yes, I do remember that now. Absolutely. And then, Mark, I'm going to let you go because I know you got callers. If you going back to college football, if you had an average team, but were given the chance to either have an elite quarterback, an elite offensive line, defensive line, whatever unit that you wanted to be elite, which would you pick?
Oh, if the offensive line, as long as it's functional, so it's average, if every position unit's average, so you're basically a 6-6 team, then I take the quarterback.
A quarterback. So a 6-6 team with an elite quarterback would go farther than a 6-6 team with an elite offensive line?
Yeah, if you're going to give me Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, fill in the blank, whoever you want to give me over the last 10 years is the best quarterback in football with an average offensive line versus you're going to give me, again, average quarterback, like the 60-something best quarterback in the country and like the best offensive line, I'll take my chances with the elite quarterback. For as much as I respect the offensive line and often call it the most important unit on the field, yeah, I gotta go with, again, you're not getting your quarterback killed. He's got an average offensive line. Sure. Because you can scheme around that, get the ball out of his hand, do some things to mitigate a average offensive line.
Yeah, very true. But what about the average offense with elite wide receivers? You have an average quarterback and average line?
No. Wide receiver, it's the most dependent position on the field. They can't do anything without other players. Like every other player on the field on both sides of the ball can do something and impact the play on their own. The wide receiver can't do anything without the ball in his hands. He needs the offensive line to block so the quarterback can throw it to him. For as much as people love wide receivers and they're fun to watch, they're freak athletes, they're the most dependent players on the field.
Well, let's be honest, they're failed basketball players.
Maybe. All right, Dr. C. Appreciate you being here, man.
Hey, have a great night.
Yeah, I know a lot of these football players would love to be playing basketball instead. I know I hear that a lot, that, Tony Gonzalez is the classic example, of course. He played at Cal and might have had a shot at the NBA. I think he was a great college basketball player. Welcome into the Voice of College Football. Homegrown's here.
Long time no hear.
What's going on with you?
Oh, man, I'll tell you what. It's Super Bowl time and it's recruiting time. We're just having fun. Man, I tell you what, Mark, and I get tired of these people that say that I got one last question, and then they go on for 2 hours.
Well,
it is what it is.
Blame me. Blame me. I can always cut them off.
Yeah,
I can do whatever I want.
We love football. We love football. But anyways, as far as the Super Bowl, I'm going for Kansas City, but I would not put my money against Philadelphia. I would not do it. And second thing, there's three things. Second thing, I don't know if you heard, but the defensive coordinator now is Kevin Steele for Alabama.
I saw somebody put that in the chat, so we'll have to look at that.
Yeah, he was formerly of Alabama back in 2007, I believe.
Yeah.
So,
I was, and most recently with Miami, they sure didn't have a good defense this past year. I'm not going to blame him. I think they have some culture issues, or did. So, if I were a betting man, I was going to bet on Jeremy Pruitt, but
that would have been nice for Alabama. Yeah. And the third thing is, I've heard nothing but negativity about this guy Reese, the offensive coordinator that came from Notre Dame to Alabama. Okay, he's a young guy.
Yep.
And he doesn't have a whole lot of coaching experience. Well, he does have a little bit, but he's just not at the elite level. Now, this brings him to the elite level. And, Nick Saban, How can you turn that down? But I think that Nick Saban brought him in because he is an offensive coordinator and he is a quarterback's coach. The thing is with Alabama is that they don't know who their quarterback coach is. I mean, I'm sorry, their quarterback is.
Yeah.
Okay. They don't know if it's going to be Jalen Milroe or Ty Simpson. Or, heck, it even could be Eli Holstein. Okay. And, that I think that's one of the reasons why he might not have been Saban's top pick, but I think that's one of the reasons why he did bring him in. I mean, Alabama fans, let's give him a chance. Let's give him a chance,
Well, Alabama fans are looking at what Notre Dame produced on offense under Tommy Rees, but they have to realize that they've been watching Tua, Mac Jones, and Bryce Young the last 6 seasons, roughly, whatever it's been.
Yeah.
And he's been working with Ian Book and Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner the last 3 seasons. There's no comparison between those quarterbacks. He's worked with decent quarterbacks. Alabama's had arguably the best quarterback since 2016 or 17.
Mm-hmm.
So he's going to.
What you're saying is that there's a.
He's got more talent to work with now.
Okay. Yeah.
Now they got to find a quarterback. He's not gonna. He doesn't get to work with Tua, Mac Jones, or Bryce Young, but Alabama's always been able to find that next guy.
That can maybe change him and elevate him.
It didn't look like Jalen Milroe in the short bit of time he had last year, but he's going to have a full off season to work on his game.
Gotcha. Well, look, that's it for me, man. So go on to your next caller.
I appreciate you being here, man.
You got it. Talk to you later.
All righty. Good stuff. All right. We keep moving here at the Voice of College Football. And speaking of the Golden Domers, got Will stopping by.
Hey, Mark. How's it going?
It's going pretty well. How are you?
I'm good. So with the whole Tommy Rees situation, I wanted him to stay to see if he was the guy. Like, if you fail with Sam Hartman, like, you're not the guy. So, like, I wanted my answer. Like, it was a mixed bag with Tommy, but
yeah,
it's what it is. Hopefully we get an upgrade, but we'll see. We'll see who Marcus can get.
Who are the names that people are throwing out?
Joe
there?
Brady is that's the one that everyone. That's the first pick. Andy Ludwig of Utah.
Okay,
is the second pick.
Yep.
I can bring up the list here.
Which Ludwig is probably, from a approach standpoint, a style standpoint, is a pretty good fit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are, and Joe Moorhead also.
All right, get him gonna leave his mighty post as the Akron head coach, huh?
Yeah. I mean, Jason Candle left Kent State, I believe, to take the Miami job.
Yeah.
So, and Kent State's a better program than Toledo, or Akron. Sorry.
So, where was I going to go with that? I was headed somewhere and I lost it. But
and Denbrock from LSU, since he has the Notre Dame connection.
Yes. Well, if Brian Kelly wanted to bring Tommy Rees to LSU with him, and now Nick Saban's hiring him, that's a pretty good endorsement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I honestly, there's a part of me that wants him to fail, but then there's the part of me that he's the first quarterback I've ever seen beat USC when I was a fan of Notre Dame. So,
well, yeah, you've got different rooting motivations there because you're losing a coach, but he's an ex-player.
Yeah.
Versus the rest of us who, there's most of college football nation that want him to fail just because he's coaching at Alabama.
Mm-hmm. The one thing on Brady, like, I want him just because I feel like because Brian Driscoll said that the LSU offense in 2018 was actually statistically worse than the Notre Dame offense this year with Drew Pine, which is hard to believe, but So
Yes, I don't doubt that. In looking at LSU's team that year, they were really good, but they were pretty balanced offense and defense. They went 10-3, won the Fiesta Bowl, and Burrow threw 16 TDs and 5 picks, I believe, was his stat line that year, and he had a great Fiesta Bowl. He finally broke out, and they really unleashed it. He went like 32 of 40 and threw for 400 yards in that game against UCF. But before that, yeah, they won a lot of close, low-scoring games.
yeah, Drew. I mean, it's the fact that It's the fact that I mean, Tommy, like, once BK left, like, Tommy said like a whole speech to the whole roster. It's like, Notre Dame's my home. I'm going to stay here for a long time. And then right after that, he like flirted with the Miami job. Of course, he dodged a bullet there. Josh Gaz did not do well. So, yeah. I mean, John, I'm going to have to disagree with you, John. Like, I think this is the most talented Notre Dame offense since 2015. I think with all the guys on this roster, like, this offense should be in the top 10. I'll say top 10, at least top 15 in the country.
This is going to be a top 15 offense? Yeah?
I'm really excited about it, Mark.
Okay. Because it was about a top 60
do you think that's
offense.
that much of a stretch?
Well, top 15 is, if they can produce a top 15 offense, especially against what I think is a pretty good schedule. Okay.
Yeah. So
is the defense going to be better, worse?
I'm scared about. I'm scared.
Okay.
I'm scared of the defense. Al Golden did not. I mean, I know it was his first year, but the linebackers took a huge step back, which was a red flag for me with him, because the linebackers. I mean, I know Marcus Freeman coached them, and he's had more success in the college level at the defensive coordinator position, but I felt like they were significantly worse with Golden as a D coordinator and linebacker coach. Dan Mullen won't recruit.
Yeah, one scoop wants to throw you Dan Mullen.
No, not a good fit for Marcus Freeman program. Also, I'm not a big Al Washington guy from his first year. That D-line underperformed as well. I know Mark Elston, he's now in Ann Arbor, funny enough. John spoke there, but he's one of the best in the country. But I felt like, I mean, also Isaiah Foskey just didn't get along with Al. So that's another red flag. But they should have put it more stats than they did. And they're also not bringing in as, I think the quality is going to be a step down as well of talent. But I think the secondary should be great.
Yeah. So Isaiah Foskey gone. Is Brandon Joseph? I know that he had a great run at Northwestern. I know that he's gone, but I had heard from a number of Notre Dame people that he didn't necessarily.
He underachieved.
Yeah.
He was good on special teams, but from an All-American, that's not what you want.
Tariq Bracy, is that a loss?
Gone, but I think that the recruitment at cornerback has been extremely strong. That it shouldn't be that much of a step down, although he did have a great year.
So out of all these new additions outside of Hartman, who do you think makes the biggest impact?
Biggest impact? Well, I think Mike Mickens in the cornerback coach room. I think that Jaden Mickey will take a step up this year.
So I'm looking at Jaden Osbury.
He's going to be great. He's going to be good, but I'm worried about the coaching at linebacker. Like, are we going to get the most out of Jaden? That's what I'm scared about. Like, he's a very talented guy, but.
Did anything happen late in the recruiting process that brought that ranking down, or it
was Peyton Bowen was the main factor in that. Him switching up.
Michael Campbell getting after you in all caps.
I mean, I'm not worried about the offense because we have Sam Hartman coming in over Drew Pine. I felt like quarterback was the main problem, and we got that fixed. So I understand where you're coming from, Michael. But yeah.
All right, Will. Anything else?
Well, Homegrown Cowboy said Joe Brady said he doesn't want to coach college football. I know, but like he has a relationship with Marcus Freeman, so I'm hoping that Marcus Freeman can use his recruiting chops to recruit a coach. But I do understand where you're coming from there. But yeah, excited about the team. Nervous. Of course, I'm nervous. I'm nervous every year, but I want to give you one question, Mark. What do you think was the best offense that's won a Super Bowl? I feel like that 2009 Saints offense is very strong.
Wow.
That was probably in my lifetime. That was probably the best offense, along with when the Chiefs won.
What is the first Super Bowl that you watched?
Well, Patriots were the Patriots Giants first one.
Okay. The first offense that came to mind, and it was probably because we just had the conversation with a few callers ago, was the Rams offense that went to 2 Super Bowls with Kurt Warner, Marshall Faulk's a Hall of Famer.
Todd Light from Notre Dame was on that team too.
Who was on that team?
Todd Light from Notre Dame.
Todd Light on the defensive side at corner. Yeah, very good. Orlando Pace, first team Hall of Famer, or first
He's a Buckeye, right?
First ballot. Yeah. One of the greatest left tackles of all time, and 3 tremendous receivers. 2 will probably be in the Hall of Fame: Torrey Holt and Andre Bruce, with Ricky Prohl as the third guy. That offense comes to mind. The Dallas offense with Aikman, Emmett, Michael Irvin, and a great all-time offensive line with Nate Newton, etc. Mark Tuinei, Mark Stepnoski, great offensive line. They weren't. Now, they were a little bit more conservative, so maybe they didn't put up the numbers, but they could certainly, Aikman was under wraps most of the season because they were a run-oriented team, but then boom, in the Super Bowl, he throws for 330 and 4 touchdowns against Buffalo. The Steve Young, whether it's the Montana version of the Niners or the Steve Young that threw 6 touchdowns in the Super Bowl against San Diego with Rice and Taylor, Ricky Waters.
Ricky.
There's another Damer. Yeah, another Golden Domer. And William Floyd, Florida State, at running back.
Do you think he should be in the Hall of Fame, Ricky? Sorry,
Ricky Waters. He had about a 10 or 11 year career. Went to Philadelphia, was really good there. I'm guessing he ran for about 11,000 yards in his career. Are you smiling for some reason as I spit out these statistics? Are you checking me?
A little bit. I mean, I never watched his pro highlights. I only watched his Notre Dame highlights.
I might surprise some people that I really know the NFL going back. Ricky Waters, I'm going to guess he scored 78 touchdowns in his career.
He had 78 rushing touchdowns.
There we go. Ran for 11,000 yards roughly, and had he was really good. He was really good. Yeah. He's borderline Hall of Fame. Yeah. I'm sure he gets talked about in the we never get to see what the ballot is. It's not like baseball where we see, okay, so-and-so got 37%, somebody got 78%. We just get the list. We get the preliminary list, and then, there's like 40 guys on there, and then all of a sudden there's, these 6 guys are going in. Okay, well, yeah. It's hard because it was a gradual thing in terms of offense taking over, and especially passing offense, where now I see guys' numbers as like a wide receiver, and I'm like, I don't know how good he is. Everybody catches 85 and for 1,000 yards. That's so. Yeah, Ricky Waters, good stuff. Yeah, I'll throw those offenses out there. Would be like the Steelers and the Cowboys back in the 70s. They weren't putting up the kind of yardage. But if you're just looking at like Hall of Famers, like Steelers, Bradshaw, Stallworth, Swan, Franco Harris, Mike Webster at center, There's at least 5 Hall of Famers on that offense. Dallas, Tony Dorsett, Roger Staubach, Drew Pearson, Tony Hill, So there you go. Good stuff. All right, Will.
Thanks, Mark.
Thanks
Have
for
a great
being here.
night.
Appreciate it. You too. Keep in mind, again, we are going to have some big realignment expansion talk right here at the Voice of College Football at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday. So that's one day from right now, Monday night, 6 p.m. Eastern Time with Tony Altamore. Here's a few things for you. So, yeah, I would not want to bore anyone with this, but earlier in the day, I quizzed myself on Super Bowl starting quarterbacks and where they went to college. And you'll just have to trust me. I hit 100 unless you want me to go through it right now. What school has played the best in the Super Bowl? What college has had the biggest impact on the Super Bowl? USC comes to mind, certainly. Miami comes to mind. But I looked up the schools with the most appearances, meaning the most player appearances in the Super Bowl. This doesn't count this season. Miami and Michigan have the most players in the Super Bowl, meaning, I guess, like Brady playing 10 times counts for 10 times. So pretty much Brady's the Michigan number. No. So you got Miami and Michigan at 122, USC 121, virtual tie, Penn State at 116, and I'm surprised by this. Number 5, in terms of colleges that produce the most Super Bowl playing appearances, UCLA. UCLA is number 5. Troy Aikman played in 3. Kenny Norton played in probably 4 or 5 because he went to San Francisco. And a lot of guys we could think of. Devontae Smith has an unusual opportunity coming up tomorrow night to become just the 5th player to win a Heisman, to win a college national championship, and win a Super Bowl championship. Do we know the other 4 to have done that? Heisman, national championship, Super Bowl championship. I can think of a number of guys that fill 2 out of those 3, like a Jim Plunkett. Won the Heisman, won the Super Bowl twice, didn't win a national championship, did win a Rose Bowl. Then you got guys like Roger Staubach, won the Heisman, won a Super Bowl, won 2 Super Bowls, did not win a national championship in college. All sorts of guys. LFG, Terry Donahue, UCLA greatness is always overlooked. Okay, LFG, this is when you guys like half listen. Did Terry Donahue play in the Super Bowl? We were talking. I was naming UCLA players who played in the Super Bowl because the stat I gave you has UCLA with the 5th most Super Bowl player appearances. I don't believe Terry Donahue ever played in the Super Bowl. All right. So yes, Tony Dorsett, Marcus Allen, Charles Woodson, Reggie Bush, Heisman, national championship, Super Bowl championship. Georgia and LSU currently have the longest Super Bowl run with player appearances. 22 consecutive Super Bowls with Georgia and LSU players. Nebraska has the longest run of 26. And in next Sunday's Super Bowl, we will see the most. Florida, it's a bit of a surprise to a certain extent, not a shock. It's not like it's Alcorn State. Florida and Oklahoma will have 7 players in the Super Bowl. Florida State 6. Georgia, Michigan, Nebraska, and Mississippi State with 4. All right. One Scoop John is stopping by. Look at this.
Absolutely. We got some great calls. So now it's all from here, but I'm glad
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah. So I heard earlier. I want to make sure I heard correctly. So you said Tom Brady. You don't consider him the greatest of all time.
So I'm making this distinguishing point.
Okay.
If anybody brings up Tom Brady, and then you say, okay, he's the GOAT, right? And they
Yeah.
would say, where would they start?
Right.
They
What's
would
the
start with his
criteria?
accomplishments, his team
Right.
accomplishments.
Right.
That's what has made him the GOAT. And obviously, he has a large contribution in that, of course. I just don't know that he's played the position better than anybody ever.
Well, where would you what metrics do you go by? I guess to
If we're
make
going
that.
by metrics,
Yeah.
he's arguably the best, because I haven't looked
Right.
at NFL passing statistics in a long time, but
Yeah, he's
you know,
89,000 regular season yards. Breeze is second place with 80. So from a regular season, from a postseason, he's got more than double. He's or almost double Manning. Manning's at number 2. Obviously,
in the
there's a little
postseason.
bit of, you got to look at the fact that the game's a lot different from the 80s and things like that. So I understand that, like, Bradshaw wasn't slinging it, 100,000 yard, because it was a different style of football. So I do understand that from a historical lens. But if you look at Super Bowls, if you look at postseason appearances in general, if you look at Pro Bowls, if you look at, the only areas I don't think he's the best is run. Obviously, he run really,
Sure.
and the fact that, like, I don't usually mention undisputed, but Skip Bayless brought up a point. He's normally the biggest Tom Brady homer, and he said, I can't really think of a big throw, like a defining throw like what Eli had, or in some of those types of situations. But still, if you just look at it holistically,
sure, he has the most impressive career. It's not even debatable, and he's the most accomplished. That's not debatable. Now, you threw some stats out there, and those were compilation statistics. Like, if you play long enough,
of course,
you of course have to be good, but you
Yeah.
also, if you play a lot. Now,
yeah,
especially
I'd say
especially
duration.
especially one quarterback in this list is going to kill this point, and it's going to be stick out like a sore thumb. But I'll throw it out there anyway. Actually, maybe certainly one quarterback. But a passer rating is more of a metric of how quality of your statistics. It's an efficiency rating, not just you threw 1,000,000 times and therefore you threw for 1,000,000 yards. You get downgraded for throwing interceptions, etc. And in that, he's 10th all time.
Okay. Got who would be up there? Mahomes, Rodgers.
Well, exactly. They're 1 and 2.
Wow.
Now, certainly, I think he's better than. Again, I will never get in a debate with anyone about Tom Brady not being the greatest quarterback of all time, because he has the argument on his side so overwhelmingly that I can't debate it. I'm just saying, in watching football, and I don't know how many times I've watched Tom Brady play. My goodness.
I'm sure quite a few.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of them.
Yes. So, I just don't know if I would evaluate his passing performance to be that he's played. And I'm not just talking about pure who can throw the ball the best, because that's not the position. That's only a small portion of the position. You have to make decisions. You've got to.
Right.
It's not just about who throws the ball the prettiest and the best. Not at all.
Right. And he doesn't have the best arm. We know that. I would put Rodgers and Mahomes in that category, but just from a perspective, I don't think we're ever going to see a 7 Super Bowl
I don't
run
think so.
In decades, if not a long time. I would say if he hadn't gone to the Bucs, then you could make a case, okay, Belichick and some of the OCs and some of McDaniels especially probably contributed a lot. You can absolutely make an argument for that, and the defenses. But then when he went to the Bucks, you really saw that he, has that recruiting ability, not only to just play the position, but then he goes out and recruits Gronk, AB, Fournette, and he gets this team together and wins a Super Bowl and gets pretty far the next year. So I think that actually, in my mind, speaks even more volumes in some cases than being in that the Patriot way system for however long he was.
Yeah.
He showed what he could do outside of Bill Belichick.
And that's a great point. You're arguing that point for him, and I get it. I think it's valid. I would argue that point against him.
Okay.
That he didn't play for the same Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that Jameis Winston played for the year before.
True.
They made that an all-star team.
Yeah.
So your point, which I believe is a valid one, is that is partially due to his draw.
Yeah.
I would say, well, he got to play with an all-star team.
True. I mean, they had the wide receivers already, and then you kind of take it to that next level with an all-time tight end.
And not just to boost his statistics, you named all the offensive guys. They brought in tons of defense to win. That team, I think they held Patrick Mahomes to 9 points in the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Yeah, they did.
Yeah.
Yep. And you got to give, and that's, I think that performance especially is why Bowles got the head coaching position over Leftwich.
Yeah.
Because of how he was able to perform in those scenarios. So yeah, of course. And I think in order to win a Super Bowl, I'm sure there's exceptions throughout history, but you kind of have to have a pretty good defense. There's exceptions. I think that, the Chiefs, for example, may not have had the absolute best defense when they won the Super Bowl, for example. But in most cases, like the Giants never would have won a Super Bowl if they didn't have an absolutely all-time defense in those Super Bowls.
Yeah.
So I'd say that the Chief win was more the exception than
absolutely
than the norm.
Here's a knock I'm going to take on Brady.
Okay. I'm ready.
He has no control over this. It's not his fault. He's just playing the hand that he's dealt. Look over the course of his 20 years with the Patriots and look at the AFC East.
Yeah.
It was awful.
Yeah, not so great.
For a brief window of time under Rex Ryan where the Jets put together a great defense and made 2 AFC championship games. We're still bad on offense, but they were competitive for a brief spurt. The division was awful. You can't go to any other division in the NFL. Every other division, Steelers, Ravens, great most of that time. Broncos, really good. Every other division had teams in it. They were the only. So that almost handed him a bye every year and home playoff games.
So I agree for the most part. I would point out also the Bills as another example of a team that was getting really good towards the end of Brady's run, and he still beat them
right at the end.
Right at the end, yes.
Right at the end,
yes. And you pointed out that I get it. Like there are absolutely aberrations, but yeah, I'm going to give you that one. For the most part, the AFC East was the AFC least.
And he had to go out and win the games. And the Patriots had to go out and execute in the playoffs. They don't hand you the Super Bowl trophy just because you're the 1 seed, but it was still, there were a lot of Houston Texans playoff games in the divisional round. There's a good bit of those kind of matchups.
Who would just for fun? Who would you put? And maybe think about it for a day or two. Come back to it, but think about who you would put as the GOAT? I'd be curious.
Again, I do believe it's Brady.
Oh, okay.
You can't argue against all the statistical and more so the winning percentage in championships. It's just so overwhelming.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Of course, I have to support my guy, Michigan Wolverine and all.
Sure.
But anyway, so thanks for having me, and everybody, don't forget, give the general reminders, like, subscribe to the Voice of College Football and the team channels, Michigan included, but all the others too. And please consider the Patreon, because it's $5. We've been having a great time in Discord over the last couple months, and just we're gonna have a lot more stuff coming, and just consider it. It's pretty inexpensive. Find it in your couch cushions, and if you like the content that Mark puts out there, that the talent that he brings on from all these different press outlets and everything else every single day, like it's a way to support the channel.
And for anyone who does join, I send you an introductory letter, and take this seriously when I say, you're in the Voice of College Football community now. Any recommendations you have, any suggestions, any requests, I am here for that. So
absolutely. Well, thanks for having me. I'm going to let you go.
Thank One Scoop. Appreciate you being here.
Bye.
One Scoop John. Good to hear from him. This is what I love, when somebody hears something I say and they're like, okay, I want to challenge that. I want to get on there. Just want to have a great conversation. There you go. Tom Brady. Is he the GOAT? It's extremely hard to argue. Is he the GOAT? This may not be the best correlation analogy. It's more of a correlation. If we were arguing best rock bands, not artists, we're sticking to bands here, isn't the default answer the Beatles? They're the greatest of all time, right? But would everyone in the chat want to personally listen to the Beatles most of the time, or more than anyone else, more than any other band? You may personally rather listen to whomever, but they're kind of the default answer to that question, I believe. I might be wrong. I might be really old school, but based on still what I see out there, and again, we're not taking solo artists into consideration because that opens up a whole other level of argument, but I just want to stick to bands because that they seem to be the default answer. But I'll even see people comment and say, well, the Beatles are the greatest, but really I don't care for them. Well, are they really the greatest to you? And I know that this is apples and oranges, because sports greatness can be backed up statistically. You can't argue. We can't argue that Bubby Brister's the greatest quarterback of all time. That's just a joke. Even if you said, well, he's my favorite and that's who I think's the greatest. Well, no, you can't argue that, because he was a marginal quarterback, and that can be proven statistically. So you have to have where the statistics in music would be like record sales, but that doesn't prove how good you are. It's a popularity contest. There's obvious worth there if the public is saying they're great, but I don't know if anyone's following along with my yes, Uncle Rico. It's a tough comparison, but I made it anyway. I jumped in there anyway with that. Jason says Tom Brady is the Jay-Z of the NFL. He's had the best career, hands down. He's not everyone's favorite, though. Jay-Z has had the best career? Really? I must be really out of touch. Sorgi says the Beatles are the GOAT. Damn Beast Media doesn't care. LFG, Zeppelin, Pink Floyd. Yeah, they would be the two that I would guess would get the most run, along with the Stones. Shoot, somebody said something here that sparked a thought and then it was gone. Are you guys going to hang with me when I'm like 80 years old on here and I'm trying to think of things that went through my mind? Tough comparison, music, something else came to mind. Anyway, I'll let it go. Oh, the Jay-Z thing. Anyway. Yeah, it's gone. Then we got Slimy Hot Boy. Going back to the playoff run there. Dave says he would take Brady, Montana, Young, Bradshaw, Elway, Peyton. I think we've got a play on words from Christopher coming in here. You'd have to have some kind of best for everyone to just let it be. Michael says the Beatles are record sales and influence on the rock band industry. They have been the band ripped off the most possible in the game. All right. Didn't mean to turn this into a music conversation, but that was the first thing that came to mind as I thought, okay, that's kind of the default answer of greatest rock band ever. But I don't think everyone personally would think that. But a lot of people would say, well, I'll rate them the greatest of all time, but they're not my personal favorite. Well, are you doing that just because everybody else says that? Or are you doing that because that's what the record sales say? Because otherwise, if you think somebody else is better, then you should just say, you know what, I think, trying to come up with some kind of ridiculous, I think the Go-Go's are the greatest rock band of all time because that's who I like to listen to. But all right, good stuff here. We are rating quarterbacks here. I think Sorty Stories has Tom Brady at 1, Johnny Unitas number 2, going way back, Peyton Manning at 3, Joe Montana, and Aaron Rodgers. That's a pretty solid list. I don't know that I can really push back on that. One Scoop John, believe me, I am bypassing solo artists with that comment. Otherwise, that would have been a completely different soliloquy on my part. But I was sticking to just bands. All right, everyone. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. I am going to be producing my top 25. I guess that actually makes sense. It doesn't make any sense right now. Nobody's played a game, but it's going to be my too early top 25. It's not really way too early. It's just kind of too early. Pre-spring practice top 25 when I get the motivation to do so. And again, I think this is pretty significant where 48 teams, 27 in the Power 5 this past season of 2022, either went up or down by at least 3 wins. So who are those teams going to be next season? All right, we will pour out the content as we always do here at the Voice of College Football. Hopefully you will take part and want to listen. Amazon link in the description section. We've got our Steve Deace show coming up on Thursday, the 1. We take one major college football topic. Steve and I debate it. We would love to have you here. I would love to continue this show. So we need to make that work. If you enjoyed it, and it sounds like everybody enjoys it, I get all sorts of great comments from it. And it is taking place based on popular demand. That's the one thing that I hear more than any. Before we started this show with Steve was you and Steve should do more. You guys should have a regular show. So we started one. So the request by many, I would say 80, 100 people over the last several months. You and Steve should do a channel, somebody said. You guys should have your own sports channel. Anyway, so we do this every Thursday with Steve. So it's live at 5. So you got to be here. Bam. We start at 5 o'clock. We go to it. So you got to be here right at 5 o'clock. And again, appreciate all of your time here at the Voice of College Football. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. We will be back here Monday at 6 Eastern with Tony Altamore to talk about realignment strategies and possibilities right here at the Voice of College Football.